To our online participants, first I would like to apologize to you because we are not able to have you during afternoon session. And basically we are discussing last year's joint statement because, as you know, we plan to have a joint communique in this summit for this year. Our comms will be able to share that joint statement with you in the chat so that you can be able to have a look. And in case you would like to participate in the afternoon discussion sessions, please just put that comment in the chat, then we'll see how we can incorporate you in those discussions. But it will be shared there, so make sure you have a look and make any additions that you think can be done there. So basically we're looking at three key things. First one was reviewing that summit to see which areas are not clear or which areas need addition. Then again, trying to describe the food system that you want for Africa. Then further going to giving description of how we can get those systems operational. So as you review that statement, have those three things in mind. Again, comms will be able to share that in the chat so that you know which aspects we'll be looking at. So briefly, I would like to thank three groups who are here physically. We have had a discussion this morning just to see key areas that needs revision in the previous joint statement. And I'm going to highlight briefly the key issues that came about. The first one was about the title. Last year's title never mentioned that was the first Africa Protein Summit. So for this year, we need to have that in our title. And also we need to have a protein consumption in that title, probably alternatives on that title. And then the other thing which was missed, the introduction part talked about civil society organizations. But remember last year we also had other people attending that summit who are not necessarily from CSOs. So there's a suggestion to have an addition of other multi-sectoral organizations or groups, because that will cater for those who will not be able to endorse that communique. So that is something that we are going to consider. The other key issue that came about is looking at what is happening in the continent. For example, we might let's think and dig to get some of the aspirational statements that have come from COP27, that have come from previous Africa Climate Week, that have come from, for example, Africa Union, trying to get those statements which align to our work in the joint communique. We really had weight into that. Then the call to action, how it was framed last year, it was more of a pointing our issues to Global North, accusing Global North. So we need to rethink and see our issues as Africa. We need to bring Africa in that context to be seen as if we are also contributors of the current issue and have clear call to action to African governments, to citizens, and other key stakeholders in food systems, because that will give a big picture and everyone will see where they can play as a group. There's issue about is it industrial of farming, is it factory farming, is it intensification? So whichever word that we are going to use there, we need to maintain it all through the communique and make sure we define it down there at footnote so that whatever who's reading that communique is able to understand what we mean with industrial livestock farming systems. Then the other key thing is, Africa Climate Week is happening in September and COP28 in Dubai. So communique has to target those key summits. because, as you know, most of the decision makers, policy makers will be attending those summits. So let's not only focus on, for example, COP28. We should also have some message going to Africa Climate Week. There's a mention of small-scale farmers, as you saw from yesterday's presentations. These are the biggest producers of what we eat, contributing up to 70% of that. And we have to connect that with what are we asking from them, or how can they be supported? Because if you look at the joint statement that we mentioned, it was talking about empowering small-scale farmers, but we never went ahead to indicate how that should be done. And that goes with the having specific demands and also proposing possible solutions to the problem that we are facing. So those are key issues that came about from the 3 groups that we had yesterday. The discussions will continue today in the afternoon. And after the group discussions, I'll have a small chat with the group leaders just to go through what will have come out. I'll be able to compile that and share with everyone attending this summit. Just to mention again to our online participants, this joint communique, last year's joint statement will be shared with you. Have a look, give suggestions on how it can be improved. And if you'd like to participate in the afternoon sessions, please mention in the chat so that we are able to incorporate you in those discussions. I think with that, I say thank you once again for support so far. I'd like to welcome Dr. Victor Yamo. Yes, Dr. Victor Yamo to take it over from me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Mwinde. As you can see, there's progress, and for those of us who want to be part and contribute to the communique, please engage the team digitally. You can also email your comments, which we then will input into the document later today. Just one brief, quick announcement for the vet surgeons who have joined us. Remember that this is an approved CPD activity, and for those of us who are joining digitally online, the requirement is for you to ensure that you indicate your name and Kenya Veterinary Board number for tracking purposes so that you can be awarded the correct points. With that, I would like to invite the next presenter, or our first presenter for today, Naomi Neema from Amref International University. She'll be talking about basic human nutrition, especially around proteins. Naomi is a nutritionist. And so, Naomi, it's all yours. Enjoy. We'll be having, after the second presentation, we'll then have a time for question and answer sessions. So let's allow Naomi to then just, I think it's
Good morning. My name is Naomi Neema. I am here on behalf of Mercy Nyangaresi. She's the one who studies at Amref International University. She's a colleague. I work with her on research projects. We're going to be talking about basic human nutrition. And as you can see, I have outlined how we're going to be talking about this. The first thing will be an overview of the proteins, the functions, requirements, and sources. And then we'll talk about protein overconsumption and the policies that are talking about protein. Now, what are proteins? Proteins make up the 3 macronutrients. We have carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. They are the main nutrients that are required in the diet and are supposed to be consumed in large amounts. So the basic building unit of protein is an amino acid. Yesterday you had a few presenters talk about essential amino acids. There are two types. There is an essential or an indispensable amino acid. These are 9. As you can see in the illustration, there are 9 and the others are 11. So essential amino acids can only be obtained in the diet. If you don't eat from the diet, you will not get it. But non-essentials can be synthesized in the body from other nitrogen compounds. Therefore, it is important that we consume protein sources that have essential amino acids. Functions. Let's look at that image over there. You can see what proteins do in our bodies, why they are crucial. First is they make up muscles, cartilage, and bone. So our bones, our muscles are made up of protein. Without it, we will have no bones. That's why we see a malnourished person who has not had enough protein, they will be weak and emaciated. They also make up enzymes and hormones that help in maintenance of homeostasis and immunity. Coagulation, that is blood clotting. There's a protein called fibrin that makes up the process of blood clotting. There's another one called opsin that makes that functions in vision. And proteins also regulate fluid balance and acid-base balance. We will see that later in the presentation. Also, they can be synthesized to make energy. When you have not taken enough carbohydrates, you have not taken enough fat, proteins will be metabolized to make energy, and that is why you will end up being very thin if you are malnourished. Now, requirements. Yesterday there was a question about requirements. A healthy adult person requires 0.8 grams per kg body weight per day of protein. Please note that that is for a healthy person. So therefore, someone who is malnourished, overnourished, or has a physiological condition, that is a pregnant person, someone requiring healing, might require different amounts. As you can see, pregnant and lactating mothers will require more because of what is happening in their bodies, as well as children and adolescents. They will require different amounts. As you have seen, 2.2 grams for infants, 1.6 grams for older than 6 months. For children, 1 to 6 years, 1.2. For adolescents or children, 6 to 14 years, 1 gram per kg. Adolescents will require around 1.5 because of their growth spurt. Another thing is that they should contribute 15 to 20% of total energy intake. Therefore, when the nutritionist comes to calculate how much protein you need, how much carbohydrate you need, they will calculate your total energy requirement, and then they will do the percentages depending on your needs. So it can go up to 30% or as low as 10%, depending on your nutritional needs. The illustration there shows the plate. Yesterday, when you were eating lunch, someone told you about the palm size, all right? So this is how a plate should look like in terms of distribution of different food groups. The half of the plate should be fruits and vegetables. And then we have grains, that is mostly carbohydrates, and protein around a quarter or less than a quarter. That is according to myplate.gov. Secondly, I will keep insisting that intake is very individualized, depending on your needs. So most of this that we cover when we say energy requirements, we'll be talking about a healthy individual. So we'll be talking about animal protein. That image shows you, for the lovers of meat, animal protein are complete protein. So that means if you eat beef, chicken, pork, you're eating animal source proteins. They are called complete proteins because They are sources of all 9 essential amino acids. For plant proteins, sources include cereals, legumes, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. These plant proteins are called incomplete proteins because they might lack or have a limited amount of one or more essential amino acid. So that means there might be need for you to find out how you will consume that extra amino acid that is lacking, and I will tell you in a few. There's an exception for soy protein. Soy protein, that is soybeans or all foods that are made from soy. Soy is the exception of plant protein that has all essential amino acids. Another alternative protein source is insects. How many of you eat kumbi or what do they call it? Termites. Yes. There are also research to look into crickets and mealworms to see whether we can get our protein from other sustainable sources. That is an image of what we just talked about. Now, back to the point of essential and non-essential amino acids. If we want to do a complete plant diet, we might need to do something called complementation so that we get all essential amino acids. So it is possible to obtain all the 9 amino acids from a plant-based diet through complementing 2 foods. You pick one food that is lacking in one amino acid and take another food that has that amino acid that is lacking in the other food, so that you can get a complete protein. As you can see in the illustration there, you take one type of food, you add, combine it with another, you get a complete protein. So legumes can be combined with cereals, and legumes can also be combined with nuts or seeds to obtain a complete protein diet. So this table shows you what I talked about in terms of amino acids lacking in one food or another. So legumes, you can see the amino acid lacking in legumes is the same that is lacking in vegetables. So you cannot combine legumes and vegetables to obtain a complete protein diet. You take legumes and then you can combine with cereals, nuts, or seeds. You will take cereals, combine them with legumes, and then you take vegetables, you combine them with cereals, nuts, or seeds to get a complete protein diet. Now let's talk about overconsumption. In many years ago, before the 2010s, thereabouts, nutrition used to be focused on undernutrition, and specifically something called protein energy malnutrition. So the focus was malnutrition for so long until now we are having a problem of overconsumption. Yesterday we saw data showing that many people think that they're not even eating enough protein, whereas at the same time there are people who are consuming excessive. So the excessive protein consumption is a nutritional problem that is currently being addressed by nutrition stakeholders. So what is the impact of consuming excessive protein? The first thing is your health. When you talk nutrition, we refer to nutrition as a health component. So protein has saturated fat, all right? It has a high calorie content, and it has a high sodium content. So all these are risk factors for non-communicable diseases. That is including diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, hypertension, obesity. So in the illustration on the side, you see, how does excessive protein intake affect health? These it lists a few diseases that can come from consuming too much protein. And non-communicable diseases is becoming a global problem. And the transition from high energy protein foods is coming to Africa as well, especially in urban areas in Kenya. If you look at the past few years, how many fast food outlets have come in? And what do those fast food outlets serve? What types of meat do they serve? How are those meat cooked? So NCDs is becoming a serious problem, and excessive protein consumption is a very important risk factor that needs to be looked at. Even the WHO shows that data on increased protein consumption, especially animal protein, is corresponding with the increased occurrence of these diseases. So apart from those diseases, research has shown that there are other effects, adverse effects of consuming too much protein. One of it is disruption of calcium homeostasis. When we say calcium homeostasis, we mean the body needs to have enough calcium. So when there is excess calcium, the body regulates it so that it comes down to the normal levels. The same when it goes down, the body regulates so that it can come to normal levels. That's what we call homeostasis. So therefore, as you can see in the illustration, I'm not sure whether it's big enough, when you eat a lot of protein, there is too much calcium that will be lost in urine, all right? So if you lose too much calcium, you end up getting something called negative calcium balance. So there is too little calcium in the body. The same way, when you eat too much meat have something called purines. Purines are metabolized to make uric acid. So uric acid becomes too much, and then you end up getting kidney stones. So excessive protein consumption is a risk factor for kidney stones through those two pathways I just mentioned. So the point about renal function comes to too much calcium, too much uric acid in urine, then you end up developing kidney stones. Other adverse effects include liver function. Metabolism in the liver is very important for the body to function normally. So too much protein also affects metabolism in the liver. It also leads to an increased risk for cancers, especially colorectal cancer. For those people with heart disease, coronary heart disease, it will increase the progression. That means you will worsen faster with increased protein consumption. Now, having finished with that, we will talk about policies. Before we go to policies, the first thing we should look at is what does the Constitution provide in terms of our rights as a Kenyan population. The Constitution in Article 43, Subarticle 1 of the Kenyan Constitution provides for the right to the highest attainable health standards. Nutrition is part of health, so everybody has a right to good nutrition. Secondly, every Kenyan citizen has a right to be free from hunger and to have adequate food of acceptable quality. Therefore, we must meet these consumption patterns. Now, I will talk about a few policies, nutrition policies that have an impact on protein consumption. Now, one is the National Food and Nutrition Security Policy 2011. This policy, it acknowledges and stipulates that high meat diets are a risk factor for development of NCDs. And as we have seen, NCDs is a global problem and is quickly becoming an African and a Kenyan problem due to the transition of our consumption patterns. Therefore, the government has a role to support programs that target preventing diet-related NCDs. So how do they do it? They do this by promoting consumption of healthy diet. In this instance, we will talk about protein, less consumption of meat or animal source protein, and also providing awareness on the role of diet intake on NCD risk. So there's a policy implementation framework for that food and nutrition security policy. So how does the government intend to implement that policy? So this framework has a goal, which is to ensure that there is consumption of safe and sufficient food for all Kenyan population. And it also has a goal to ensure that food consumed meet quantity and quality requirements to achieve optimal nutrition status. So your nutrition status should be at the normal level. Therefore, for undernourished population, the goal is to consume a diet that makes sure they achieve a normal nutrition status as it is for overnourished individuals. It also stipulates the strategies for achieving nutrition improvement as part of food and nutrition security. So now we look at the strategies that the framework has put in place. Now, to improve nutrition through the life cycle, the government intends to develop appropriate guidelines. It also intends to support nutrition support systems, promote interventions, promote consumption of adequate diets, and also strengthen linkages with other sectors. To reduce increasing prevalence of diet-related NCDs, it intends to develop and implement nutrition guidelines. It also intends to support research towards the development of appropriate lifestyle and nutrition interventions, and sensitize people on the impact of NCDs, and also the role of diet and healthy diets in these NCDs occurrence, and also promote production and consumption of nutrient-dense foods. That is the alternative protein sources that we are trying to advocate for. So some of these strategies have led to the development of guidelines such as the diabetes manual that nutritionists use to manage diabetes. The government also does surveys such as the stepwise survey that captures the NCD situation and the consumption patterns in terms of the risk factors and healthy dietary patterns that lead to NCDs. They also have an NCD strategic plan 2021, 2022 to 2026 that also targets healthy and unhealthy diet consumption. So you will notice that when the government does policies, the main focus when it comes to excessive protein consumption is about NCDs. And unhealthy dietary intake is one of the important pillars in terms of combating NCDs. Another strategy is to improve advocacy, communication, and social mobilization by maintaining an environment that the nutrition sector can ensure that it meets its goals. They also intend to allocate resources to promotion of these messages, intending to improve knowledge and attitudes toward healthy nutrition practices. Yesterday, there was data about a study that was done about attitudes about protein consumption. That this point talks about improving knowledge and attitude. So perhaps we might want to know whether the government has been able to achieve change in attitudes in terms of unhealthy food consumption. The government also intends to strengthen community engagement, which it has done in terms of training community health workers in the community so that they can push the agenda in terms of prevention of NCDs. In schools, nutrition education is a component. The government wants to put it in curriculum. one thing about changing nations, changing the culture of nations, it has to begin at a young age. Therefore, teaching our young learners to adopt attitudes that show how good or how bad a certain culture is important. When you want to treat yourself to a good meal, what do you eat? What do you eat? What do you eat, Dr. Muinde? What do you eat? Yeah, yes. So let me tell you about something that I like to eat as a culprit myself. When I am lucky to get some money, I will treat myself to a pizza, right? There is this good pizza called Meat Deluxe. So this is a cultural perspective. What will you go to eat? You go for chicken wings that are very tasty and very spicy. So for us to change those attitudes, we have to begin with our children. So when when I was growing up, when mom or dad brought meat home, it was, the word was, today we're eating well, right? So we need to change the narrative of what does eating well mean? And it has to come from the children so that the generations can change. So therefore, this is the target of the government, to promote such kind of nutrition information and to develop frameworks that integrate that into curriculum. Now, we talk about the national guidelines for healthy diets and physical activity. So this is one of the things that has come out from the fact that we have been having unhealthy diets. So we have 7 healthy eating principles that have been stipulated in that policy. The first one is variety. Variety means eating foods from 4 or 5 food groups a day. As Esther mentioned yesterday, the minimum consumption, the adequate is 4 food groups a day. Adequacy is that the meal should meet nutritional needs, the individual needs of a person. Balance. What is a balanced diet? What is a balanced diet? Something that, a diet that provides sufficient amounts of food from different nutrients, all right, from food types. Therefore, as you saw that plate gives you a balanced diet. Energy control means that there should not be overconsumption or underconsumption of energy-giving foods, that is carbohydrates, protein, fats. Nutrient density. When we say a food is nutrient dense, it means it provides many nutrients and provides little energy at the same time. For example, that chicken wings and pizza that we were talking about, how many nutrients does it provide and how much energy? So you find that it provides so much energy, but very few number of nutrients. On the other hand, a fruit salad will provide very many nutrients and a small amount of energy. Therefore, it can meet your nutritional needs and not lead to overconsumption of energy. Moderation, it means energy, nutrients that provide energy should not be consumed excessively. Minimal processing. What is a processed food? I know you have heard the term processed foods. There is beef, right? You have seen in the picture, there is beef, and then there is beef sausage. So beef sausage is a processed food. When a food is processed, it is added a few things. For example, for sausage, some nitrates are added, leading to more sodium. More sodium is a risk factor for hypertension. Therefore, avoiding processing of processed foods is imperative for maintaining good health status. Then lastly, we have the Kenya Nutrition Action Plan. What does the nutrition department plan to do in terms of protein intake. So, as we have said before, the goal is reducing the occurrence, morbidity, and mortality from NCDs. Therefore, this action plan provides a framework for reducing these risk factors. How do they intend to do it? The first thing is monitoring the NCD's risk factors. Our attention will be driven towards monitoring protein consumption patterns with a focus on animal source protein. And then promote behavior change towards consumption of healthy diets. One of the points that Dr. Mwende has mentioned this morning is promotion of healthy protein options. Integration of the prevention agenda into policies, as we have seen in the policies we've talked about. And also, other sectors need to take up this healthy eating agenda in terms of agriculture, trade, and such. They also intend to promote inclusion of related nutrition content in media. How many times do you come across a media item that mentioned nutrition? My media people. That is a challenge, that we should incorporate more of this content into media, and the government intends to push for that agenda. And with that, I come to the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Naomi. I like the question. When you want to treat yourself with food, what first comes to your mind? We all know that. And the time to think of consuming what is nutrient dense. Okay? I don't consume a kilo of beef over the weekend with my friends having drinks, and I assume that I've eaten the best. I better go for that fruit salad, which is cheaper and covers all the nutrients. Thank you for that presentation. Again, if you have any question for Naomi, please note them down. We'll discuss them, or she'll be able to respond them at the end of the session. Now I'd like to welcome Dr. Victor Yamu. Victor is Farming Campaigns Manager at World Animal Protection, and he'll be taking us through protein consumption, a CAP survey that we did, which will somehow respond to some of the questions that we had yesterday, and also touch in some aspects that were covered by Naomi. Karibu, Victor.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. I get a bit worried when I see many mics. I might start campaigning for 2027. Yeah, so I want to give a brief on knowledge, attitudes, and practices on protein consumption in Kenya. A study that we took or undertook. So you guys are getting it straight from before it's even been processed completely. And I think it will address certain things, and then it will give Prof some questions to address. Prof, we are banking on you. Yeah. So as World Animal Protection, I think yesterday the DVS started it very well. He said you must market the institution you work for. Yeah. And so since my boss is here, so I want to market so that I am not dropped off from the payroll. So wild animal protection, that is our mission is we move the world to protect animals, and our vision is a world where animals live free from cruelty and suffering. And essentially, as I usually say, the we in our mission is about all of us. It's about the nutritionists, the veterinarian, the consumer, the media fellows, everybody, because we have a role to play. And as the nutritionist Neema has just said, it's about making certain decisions and understanding certain things. And that's why as an organization, then we put certain, sometimes controversial propositions before you. We are driven with around a global strategy 2021 to 2030 called A New World for Animals. And so that's what underpins the work that you're doing between now and 2030. And essentially is then to build on some of the work that we've done previously. The strategy has two strategic goals. One is goal one, which I had, is to ensure farmed animals live good lives by transforming the global food systems. And goal two is about stopping wild animals being cruelly exploited as commodities by changing their systems that allow it. So it's essentially about the animals. Even when we are driving an African protein summit, let's not forget it's about how do we then ensure that animals live a good life, and how then do we ensure that that animal, when it's catered for, then doesn't give us problems, because beyond non-communicable diseases that Neema has talked about, there are also things that come through with the food that we eat, antimicrobial resistance, chemical residues, because we use certain chemicals to grow the animal, and other things that we then need to look at, organisms that can give us problems. And I think as an organization, we did the supermarket meat testing and we know what the results were. So that's essentially what we're looking at. We are looking at that animal and then the other things that then affects that animal, or that animal contributes to the other critical and important things that we are discussing. Climate change, as for instance, that underpins this conference. Around food systems, we are then looking at 3 interventions. One is no future for factory farms, and I think yesterday it was labored in the presentations that were done, the impact of factory farms, the fact that we are losing biodiversity, its contribution to public health, issues around climate change. And that's part of the reason that we then look at some of these things and need to carry you along with in the work that we do. Food revolution is about the diets. How do we shift you to then eat humane and sustainable food products, or products that are coming from high welfare production systems that are then sensitive to the animal, but also looking at, as Naomi or Neema has just explained, looking at alternative foods, because the understanding that proteins come from animals is something that we then need to change. And I think it's based on the fact that, and I hear Kenyans saying this frequently, or Africans, that when we were young, we were not able to eat meat. Naomi, I agree with you. When I was a young man, if meat came home, it was Christmas. Yeah? So that's something that we need to change and start considering some of these things. And then, of course, fairer finance is about redirecting financial resources from either public or private sector finance institutions to ensure that then it gets into funding the right humane and sustainable production systems, or proteins system for that. So I'll briefly then go through the study and then give you the results, and then we can have a discussion on the what we have seen and what is out there. Remember that this study is about us. Kenya was taken as a reflection of the African continent. We might replicate the study in other African countries as soon as we finish this one. But the idea is to then understand what is our understanding of proteins. In fact, the study objective was to determine the knowledge, attitudes, and practices on protein consumption by the Kenyan consumer. Why are we consuming? Why are we behaving? What are these practices, and what are driving some of these things? Since I am a good student, I was told for a good study, and Prof is here, you must say it's a cross-sectional survey, or was it a retrospective survey, all those things. So I'm trying to look like a scientist, but the scientist here is Mwinde, Patrick. I am the guy who just reads results and tries to interpret them. It was carried over 3 weeks, somewhere around May, and it was done by administering questionnaires outside shopping malls, restaurants in 6 key cities. 4 of them are cities. The other 2 are big towns, Mombasa, Nairobi, Nyeri, Nakuru, Kisumu, and Eldoret. But then we also then did some of the questionnaires digitally so that we gave opportunity for people who are not around some of these facilities. The study areas, as already indicated, was around Mombasa, Nairobi, Nyeri, Nakuru, Kisumu, and Eldoret. And I've tried to highlight those areas on the map there for those who are not Kenyans so that you can see how it was related. Mombasa is down at the coast. Then Nakuru, Nyeri, and Nairobi and Eldoret are part of the highlands. And Kisumu is at the lake shore towards the other end. The respondents, we had 1,528 people respond to the survey. 821 were, or 53% of them were done physically by being interviewed one-on-one on a face-to-face interview, and 707 responded to the digital platform, whatever was sent out digitally. And again, you can see from the distribution, the most number of people, of course, came from Nairobi. Then we had very good responses from Eldoret and from others. Others are mostly the digital people. Yeah. In terms of gender, it was almost a 50-50 split, but the ladies had it. 51% were ladies and 49% were male. And then again, we've given you the variation or the various, how it looked at from each and every of those cities that we looked at. And in most cases, there were slightly more women than men. In terms of status, we are saying that a good proportion, almost 56% of the respondents were actually heads of households because they are the people who make decisions. And then 27% were spouses to the heads of household. And then we've also given you the distribution from a male and female perspective. Of course, from the males, 75% of them were heads of households. And from the females, 51% of them were spouses of the heads of households. And so essentially those were the critical people, and that's how the distribution was in terms of the status of the respondents. And this is important because it then starts looking at who's making decisions and how that decision. Remember yesterday we talked about, I think Prof indicated that chickens in Kiambu are owned by the farmer, the women do the work, but the money then ends up in the men's pockets. I don't know what the handbags are for, but anyway, it's another debate. Yeah. Yeah. Then in terms of age, it mirrors I was told in school that there's something called a bell-shaped. So the biggest proportion of respondents were actually the middle age, 30 to 34 years, 35 to 39 years, and then around 40 to 44. And then, of course, Tennyson and I at the tail end, we were a bit of the lesser people there, and the young Turks also. So it mirrored what the population would look like and the people who make decisions around some of these things. And it's again been distributed around in terms of males and females for that matter. In terms of level of education, 68% were people who've gone to school all the way to colleges. 27% are people dropped out of at high school level. And then people dropped at primary school level, about 5%. Again, when you look at the distribution from a gender perspective, again, the same process. The highest number of people are university or college graduates, then high school, people left at high school, and then primary school for that matter. We then looked at household income, yeah, because we wanted to see, and in the detailed report, we then tried to analyze whether the level of income, and we looked at households because it's important to look at what the whole house is having vis-a-vis an individual income, because decisions tend to be made from a household perspective. So we had 40% of the people earning above 100,000 shillings, which is, the other day I was told that if you are earning more than 30,000 shillings, you are actually, in this country, almost 80% of us earn below 30,000 shillings. So these are people who are, these households who are well endowed at certain levels. And then, of course, the next big category was 50 to 100,000, then with 21%, and then 17% was 20 to 50,000. So relatively, and you can understand the reason why this would be, because we were doing this outside urban, in urban centers and outside shopping malls. and then using a digital platform, which then tends to push it towards the top end of the income brackets. Then we looked at household expenditure, and again, we then tried to analyze the data based on household expenditure. So the highest expenditure above 100,000 shillings was only 7%. The biggest number of people in terms of expenditure, household expenditure, was about 20 to 50,000 shillings. That had about 38% of the participants. So essentially, again, it's a relatively high income bracket sort of thing. And I think looking at what Neema was saying, a lot of meat consumption is actually around the people who are at the high income brackets, and that's what we're seeing in this continent. So that then drives part of what we are looking at. So we then looked at eating habits. Yeah, Kenyans tell me they're carnivores, but when we then ask them quietly, so what do you think you are? 83% of us think we are omnivores. We eat both meat. We have a relatively balanced. I don't know about Neema's plate and the four food groups that you need to eat, but a lot of us say we are omnivores. Carnivores are just about 7% of us, vegetarians about 6% of us, vegans 2%, and the others were about 2%. And if you look at it based on food groups, again, you can see the next question then we asked, and I think this is one of the important questions that we needed to address. What is a balanced diet? And Neema has just talked a bit about it. And essentially, a good chunk of us don't know what a balanced diet is, but when we asked both male and female, the females tended to have higher percentages in response. I know Mwinde will talk about scientific significance. We've not analyzed this for significance. Those are for the scientists who will be doing a research paper. But what we're essentially saying is, for the big groups, the carbohydrates, the vitamins, and the proteins that essentially constitute what a balanced diet is, the females scored slightly higher, but slightly over 85% had an idea that these are the foods that then constitute a balanced diet. Then, of course, a few of us then threw in things like dairy products. This must be people from the highlands. People then threw in fats and others that we can give you details. So essentially, there's some level of understanding, and I think it got even more interesting when we looked at individual education levels, because then we were a bit disappointed, Mwinde and I, that in terms of education, unfortunately, it's not on the slides. The people in the tertiary seemed not to know what a balanced diet is. So maybe it's because we were taught balanced diets in primary and secondary schools. By the time we get to university and become very technical, we forget what we were taught in early ages. Yeah, and maybe that's part of the problem. I'll leave the nutritionist to say why maybe we don't eat well. When we then asked the frequency of eating a balanced diet, you can see what happens then. Amongst the males, 37% said they often eat a balanced diet, and about 30% said they always eat a balanced diet, which then gives you about 67% of us feel that we eat a balanced diet. In the female side, about 44% said they often eat a balanced diet, and you can see the difference between the males and the females. Yeah, and 17.3% said they always eat a balanced diet, which works roughly to about 61%. So you can see it's around 60% of us believe and assume that we eat a balanced diet on often or at least always. Reasons why we don't eat a balanced diet were various. One, and the major one, was about not being able, it's affordability of that diet. And it was very interesting because remember the kind of money we are spending, household expenditures, and then 40% of us then say that you're not able to afford a balanced diet. And maybe for the nutritionists, that's your next point of call. Is the issue affordability or availability? And that's something that we then need to discuss. Others don't eat a balanced diet, which is availability is in terms of inaccessibility of certain foods. So there are foods they would want to eat, 15% foods that they think is part of the balanced diet, but it's not accessible. And that's part of, so it's about affordability and then accessibility as part of the issues. The other issues that were raised, 36% of them raised other issues, Again, the data is available for analysis. There were cultural issues. There were also health reasons, issues. I'm not sure what health issues would be why you don't want to eat a balanced diet, because not eating a balanced diet is already creating a health issue. But that's how the research findings came. We then looked at animal-sourced proteins. How frequently are they consumed? And we then gave a series of animal-sourced proteins: beef, goat meat, mutton, pork, fish, chicken, eggs, milk, and milk products. Interestingly, the most consumed animal-sourced protein is milk. Yeah, and I think people then concluded, because we take it in tea, So you can see the top blue spike at the end, which is essentially milk is consumed daily. It was closely followed by beef. And remember yesterday we said most of us eat beef. When you talk of meat, it's beef, and then eggs. Yeah. Then if you look at in terms of at least twice a week, the most consumed one is beef. Then beef and eggs are almost there together. And so you can quickly start seeing towards where people are going towards consumption of some of these things. And so again, goes back to that question: is it meat only, or there are alternatives within the meats that we need to look at? Or are there other things that we need to be looking at? We then also did the same for plant proteins. And in terms of plant proteins, we looked at beans, peas, lentils, green grams, nuts, soy products, which the nutritionist Naomi has told you is one which is holistically has everything. Yeah, but you see, it's the one that a lot of us don't even know about. Yeah, and then millet. A lot of us don't even understand, and maybe the nutritionist will again help us. When you talk of millet, a lot of us assume millet is a carbohydrate. But the nutritionists tell me millet is part and parcel of proteins. Yeah? So I can see people nodding. Yeah? That's why we do some of these things, to then try and get some of us. So the most consumed plant protein is actually millet, followed by beans. Millet, nuts, beans. That's where we need to look at them. Yeah? And then when you look at the ones consumed at least twice a week, then you have beans, you then have green grams, then you have at certain levels millet again. And those are some of the things that we then need to look at. And I think it's about sensitizing people that their proteins are not necessarily meat alone, but the other alternatives that we need to be looking at. Which then brings us to the question: the knowledge and understanding of alternative proteins. Prof, this is how your people know. 64% of us have no clue what alternative proteins are. Yeah. And again, as we said, it depends on, if you look at level of education, the least knowledge of alternative proteins is at the primary school level. People left at primary, then it moves, it improves as we go up the education ladder. And so by the time we get to people who went to college, 45% of us understand what alternative proteins are. And I think that's part of the discussion that we need to have, the relevant role of alternative proteins in our diets. Yeah. We then ask questions, in your own opinion, and I think data has been given here. Yesterday we talked about palm size, we talked about an average person, I think Neema said it today, a healthy person needs to consume about 0.8 grams per kilogram body weight. That was the figure, Neema. Yeah, so if you are about 60 kilos, like some good friends of mine, you should be consuming about 48 grams of proteins. 48 grams of proteins, not meat. I need to be very clear on that one. So when we asked this question of adequacy of protein consumption, do people feel that they eat enough proteins? 58% said they feel they eat enough proteins, while 18% didn't know, which was very interesting. So they just eat. They're not sure what they're eating. And then again, we split the data for you around the male and females, and you can see that 57% and 59% of males and 59% of females believe that they eat adequate proteins. Yeah, what worries me is I don't know that is 21% for males and 14% for females. And then the not sure ones, 9% and 7.6%. Remember that inadequate consumption leads to malnutrition. Excess consumption also leads to malnutrition. So those are things that we need to be very clear of. We then looked at preference of protein sources. And the first one, we've done it in terms of males and females. And almost 66% of males prefer animal proteins compared to 55% of females. Again, significance has not been treated here. The scientists are still crunching the numbers, the p-values na hizo values zingine wanafanyanga. Yeah? And so that again is very interesting that consumption preference is, to me, looks significantly different, but I'll wait for the jury that is analyzing it. That males prefer animal proteins vis-a-vis females preferring proteins from other alternatives. When you look at it in terms of education, yeah, the people who've gone to tertiary education, yeah, 73% of us, no, the tertiary education, 58% of us prefer animal-sourced proteins against 24%. But at the primary school level, and it goes back to what we were saying, cultures, yeah, at the lower level, people left a bit earlier, the preference for meat is very high. Remember, again, this is being done in urban centers. And so that, again, should be informing some of the things that we're looking at, the level of understanding of where the protein is coming from. I have 2 more slides, then I complete. The knowledge of nutritional conditions or medical conditions. 78% of us understood that the poor eating contributes to medical conditions. But the interesting thing is a lot of them then, we didn't get the big conditions that we were looking for. You can see what was listed. Stunted growth, low immunity, kwashiorkor, beriberi, rashes, pale skin, yeah, obesity at certain level, marasmus, liver conditions, gout. And I think it slowly starts to inform our level of awareness and understanding of non-communicable diseases. Remember that we have talked about non-communicable diseases being one of the major things that we're looking at. In fact, we are told non-communicable diseases is on the rise globally, but the significant rise in non-communicable diseases is in sub-Saharan Africa. So while we might be saying we are not eating enough meat, the reality is that we might be at certain levels, especially around urban centers, overindulging, and that's leading to non-communicable diseases. In fact, it was very interesting for those of you who've read the recently released health survey. It tells us obesity levels for women who've gone to school up to university level of productive age is at what percent? Let me see if you read these things. Okay. A certain president said if you wanted to hide things from Kenyans, you put them in the newspapers. Yeah. So the newspaper gave us some data a week or 2 ago. It said that 50% of the women that have gone to school of reproductive age are actually obese. Yeah. That's part of what we are dealing with. And that's maybe the discussion we are having. Why then do we need to look at alternative proteins? Naomi has given us a bit of it. And so this is the position, and that's where we've reached. These are the findings, or the initial findings of the report. We will be launching the report officially in a short while. But essentially, it starts to then inform certain ideas. Do we understand what we should be consuming? Are we being driven by other things? Is the level of education or the level of income something that we need to be looking at? Or is there a significant difference between those who, quote unquote, don't have and those who have in terms of incomes? Or is it a problem that cuts across? Is age a factor? Because we also looked at age. Yeah, and in this country, we can see people younger than myself, way, way younger than myself, who are having dying of non-communicable diseases, high blood pressure, diabetes, etc. So with those few remarks, I want to leave it there. Thank you very much for listening. And I will invite Mwinde to then take us to the next one.
Thank you so much, Dr. Victor Yamo, for that presentation. I think I think you should have posed this question that you posed to me when we were planning for this study. Who know that millet is a protein?
Oh, now they know. I told them the answer.
Yes, of course you had mentioned it, but who knew that millet is protein? I thought it's in class of other cereals like maize and so it was shocking for me to realize millet is protein. Yeah, we are going to have one more session. Then okay, good. Thank you, Victor, for that. We are going to have our third presentation for today, and this will be done online, and to be focusing on alternative proteins in Africa, and it will be done by Sunday, who is joining us from Nigeria. It should be sharing his screen. So Sunday, if you are ready, you can take it away. Introduce yourself, then take us through your presentation. Thank you so much. Sunday, confirm you can hear me?
Okay, good evening, everyone.
Good. Yeah, proceed. We can hear you.
Am I audible?
Yes, please proceed.
Good morning, everyone. Please confirm if I'm audible, please.
Yes, I confirm you are. You can proceed.
Please, can you all hear me?
Text him. Yes, James Sunday, we confirm we can hear you. You can proceed.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Yamo, for the opportunity to present in this summit. My name is James Sunday Gordon, the Program Officer from One Health and Development Initiative, OHDI. One Health and Development Initiative, a non-governmental organization that has been in existence for over 4 years now, addressing interrelated issues of human, animal, and environmental health through One Health approach. But for the purpose of this presentation, I'll be presenting on introduction to alternative proteins. First, alternative protein is One Health approach, because we are looking at how alternative protein can actually help to address issue of human health, animal welfare, and the environment. Alternative Protein Africa, APA, is a project of One Health and Development Initiative, established as a resource hub and platform to promote knowledge, information, advocacy, research, innovations, and movement building for the growth and advancement of alternative protein sector in Africa. It is a community. There's a community where people can actually learn about alternative proteins. A community where people can promote alternative protein in Africa. A community where people can have a better understanding of what alternative protein is all about. And the community is actually meant for everybody. What alternative protein actually means. People don't know that there are other sources of alternative protein. That protein protein can actually be sourced from plants and other sources, not just only in animals. Why? Reason. What is the reason for alternative protein? Just like I said earlier, we all know that over-dependence in animal source for alternative protein have actually increased animal agriculture, which is impacting human health. For instance, consuming high amount of animal products, particularly the red and the processed meat, is associated with an increased risk of chronic diseases, just like Naomi mentioned earlier. Diseases such as cardiovascular diseases, we have the type 2 diabetes, and certain types of other cancers, such as the colon cancer that Naomi mentioned earlier. And also climate change. We see that livestock production is regarded as one of the greatest contributors to greenhouse gas emission. And also the animal agriculture can also be a source of zoonotic diseases. When zoonosis, where infectious diseases are transmitted from animals to zoonosis, to humans, such as the avian flu and so on. Then poor animal welfare. We see because of the overexploitation of animal, the dependence on animal as a source of alternative protein have actually defeated animal welfare and other One Health issues. Then we have the poor public awareness, understanding or perception of alternative proteins and the benefits to human health, animal welfare, and ecosystem. We see because of the poor understanding, the limited knowledge that people actually have out there about what alternative proteins is all about, it has actually limited the adoption or the acceptance of alternative protein and the benefit that humans can actually derive from this, and how this can actually also help to protect our animal, reduce animal cruelty in the society. Not only that, also help to maintain environmental resources that can contribute to sustainability. And compared to other continents and countries, we see countries like Singapore, United Kingdom, some other countries in Asia continent, and even in USA, we see that they have advanced, they're advanced in technology, and we see they have actually explored this alternative protein, because basically alternative protein can be divided into three forms. We have the plant-based source, the cultured or cultivated meat, and the fermentation-based source. But then in Africa, due to lower proliferation of innovations, startups, technology, and investment in alternative protein sector, these have not actually been utilized. But then we want to let people know that even though Africans don't actually have the technology to explore other means of alternative protein, there are other sources which we can explore, like the plant-based sources, where we can actually get protein. In fact, just like Naomi mentioned earlier, by right combination of this, and we can actually have a complete balance, like a complete protein that will help to nourish our system without depending on animal as the only source of alternative protein. What are the goals? The goals of APA is to bridge the knowledge gap on alternative protein in Africa, help to promote the knowledge, to help to promote information, to make people understand that alternative protein can actually be gotten from other sources outside animal. Yes, of course, we know that even in Africa, even in my own country, Nigeria, I've seen occasions whereby I ask people that, are you a vegan? Are you a vegetarian? Like, some don't really even understand what a vegan means or what a vegetarian means. I've had a kind of personal encounter with people telling them, oh, this is what it means. So, which means people have little or no knowledge about what alternative protein is actually all about. So this APA, we are coming up with this project to help promote this information, to actually make people understand what alternative protein is all about, and also collect and provide globally relevant information on alternative protein. Like the Good Food Institute, they are doing a great work, the aspect of alternative protein. So they are relevant information which are out there every day, every month, about alternative protein and the happenings, all over the world. So these are the kind of information we also want to be putting out there putting out in our community, in our groups, for people to actually learn and know about alternative protein, because it's actually all about a change of mindsets, a change of action and behavior. Because when you're not informed, of course, you won't know that, okay, this kind of thing actually exists, or you can actually source your protein from other sources and not just only on animal. And also to promote, advocate, and support people transitioning into diets that support alternative protein to animal protein sources. Then also enhance local innovations on alternative protein and support from local resources in Africa. Yes, of course, just like I said earlier, that we know that we don't actually have the technology in Africa presently to probably explore other means, like the cultured means that other countries, advanced countries, actually make use of laboratory technologies to culture meat by isolating tissues from meat and also growing them in the laboratory. Of course, we don't have the technology yet, but there are other means for which you can get protein locally, that will source them locally, just like we have the plant-based sources, like the legumes, the whole grains, the nuts, the vegetable and fruits. They are good source of protein that we can actually explore. Then also to support commercialization and businesses in the alternative protein sector. Yes, when people get to understand what alternative protein actually means, to understand it better, to have the knowledge, we will see that people will actually go into, because everybody would want to test, everybody would want to have, a taste, look at it, okay, how does it work? What are the sources and all of that? We'll see people will commercialize it, and we'll see businesses coming up. People doing business around organic protein, like bringing in product from even outside the country that are maybe vegan food, plant-based, and so on. Then we expect that if we fully integrate all these goals, we expect that it's going to impact a lot by increasing awareness, knowledge, and acceptability of alternative protein in Africa. When people are informed, they know well about it, they have the knowledge, and removing that perception, or that perception that maybe vegan food is only meant for the Western society. No, thinking that maybe it's not a rocket science. It's what we have around us. It's what we can actually source locally. So this will help to increase awareness, knowledge, and acceptability. People will accept it. People will adopt it. Will adopt plant-based sources of plant-based of protein, and also to help to strengthen partnership and collaboration between stakeholders. And not only that, it will increase adoption of alternative protein and less animal food sources. That is what we expect. That when we fully integrate this, promoting information on alternative protein, publicizing it in the public through online media, outreach to institutions, private places, and so on. It will help people to adopt the alternative protein and the less dependent on on animal food sources. Also, it will increase innovation and investment in alternative protein in Africa. When people get to know about it, know that, okay, this is very good, because it will help to maintain the ecosystem. And also, by bringing in innovation and investment in alternative protein sector. Then engagement, we hope that our engagement will be driven by digital media platforms, on-site activities where relevant. Like, we'll make use of our digital platforms to post recipes on vegan food, post information, post different resources that will help people to transition into different diets, that will help people to make their choices and options of their food. And also on-site activities like going to high institutions, outreach to hospitals and so on, where we can have maybe vegan food sampling and so on. So that's what we hope to achieve. And we're using this medium also to invite every one of us to follow us on our digital platform, like the Twitter page, Instagram page, LinkedIn page, and here is our website as well. And for collaboration and maybe partnership, you can reach us on, you can reach me on james@onehealthdev.org. You can reach Kiki at onehealth.org as well. This project actually started, we started this project like 2 So in case if you visit our page and voting looks new to you, yeah, of course, it's a new project, and we believe that with time we'll get to where we are going to. And also, you can follow or join our Facebook community. Here, you're welcome to post your ideas, your opinions, share opportunities, and let us grow together and actually push this to make people to know that there are other sources of alternative protein. Can source their protein from plants, can source their protein from different sources, and not just only on animal, because these animal sources of protein actually have a negative impact, to human health, and not only that, to our ecosystem as well. So this brings me to the end of this presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Sandy, for that presentation. We have had 3 presentations so far, and now I would like to open the discussions for Q&A to our online participants. Please post a question or comment in the platform. We have heard from Naomi, who took us through basic human nutrition policy provisions in Kenya. Then Yamo came in to take us through knowledge, attitudes, and practices on protein consumption in Kenya. Then we have just heard from Sandy, who has taken us through alternative proteins in Africa. So it's a Q&A session now. So those who are present, in case you have a question or comment, please, this is your time. Thank you. Any question, any comment? In addition to the 3 presentations that we have had, please, this is your time. Dr. Amo, what did you say yesterday when people don't ask questions or don't comment? Huh? Oh, yes. Victor, now you let me pass the mic. So you start by saying your name, then you pose your question. Thank you.
My name is Kevin Waswa. It's just a concern to Dr. Yamo here. He has told us that millet is the most consumed plant protein. But when we carry our own research, like we are in this room, let's say the 10 of us, if you ask a question like, how many people consume millet? You will find that it's a very hard question. So Dr. Yamo, kindly elaborate that concern. Thank you. Millet. Leo umekunywa uji ya millet? Wangapi hapa wamekunywa uji ya millet leo hapa ndani?
Oh. The question is, do you know millet?
Yes, I know millet. That's why I said it's a concern. I said it's a concern.
Okay.
So maybe elaborate on that.
Okay. Yam will be able to answer that. Any other question or clarification from those who are here? I hope online participants have been able to follow the conversation. Oh, there are 2 questions online. Let me pick that up. Just a moment. Yes, there's a question from Samuel Chemoges. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. But his question reads, from presentations of yesterday, most of animal proteins sources in Kenya appear to come from the northern arid parts of the country. How come there is no research that has been done there regarding consumption of animal protein from Dr. Yamo's presentation today? We have another question from Maina Ngodo. Excellent work, Dr. Yamo. did the study discriminate between rural people visiting town or the town dwellers? If so, was there a pattern on the protein access and consumption by county? Dr. Sunday, you have a question from Dr. Mwenda Mbaka. Dr. Sunday, there are several challenges associated with the alternative sources of protein to animal sourced proteins in Africa. Some of these challenges include limited awareness and acceptance, cultural and culinary preferences, availability and accessibility, limited infrastructure and supply chain, regulatory and policy frameworks, education and research. Kindly let me know how you propose to address these to ensure an adoption of the innovation. Dr. Sunday, I hope you got that clear. So I'd like to start with Dr. Amo. Many questions have been posed to you, so you can respond to those three before Dr. Sunday comes in. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. The easiest one to respond with is for Kevin, in the room. The scientists here will tell you that your representation in this room is biased. Yeah, so you cannot use this room as a reflection of what is happening nationally. That's why you need to go to the field and ask your questions in the field, because this room is not representative of the people out there. And you heard one of them saying, tunakunywa uji. I am with her. In the morning, I did take uji before I came here. So that's the data and I think that's where we need to be very careful. That's the data coming out from the field. So we cannot debate whether it's right or wrong, because that's the data that is coming out from the field. And the field is telling you that the most consumed product in plant proteins is millet. So I'm like you, I'm surprised, because when we went out, we had other ideas. And that's what science is all about, going out and finding out what is actually happening, and then making a decision around some of these things. So that's how the data shape out. I wonder why you didn't complain about nuts, because even here, kuna watu wamekula nuts saizi. Yeah? Yeah, your own thinking. But that's what I'm telling you. That's the difference between your own thinking and actual data on the ground. I take people on the ground, boots on the ground, digitally, and that's the information that they've given us. I then go to the two questions that are online. The easiest one to deal with is my good friend Maina Ngodho, Dr. Ngodho. Did the study discriminate? No. The assumption was that anybody we found, remember that we are in the village or in a town, we are in Eldoret, and people are responding. We did not go and ask them, where did you come from? The assumption was that if you are in Eldoret, you must be representing Eldoret, and so we did not then classify between urban and rural. I think that would be another level of study that can be done. For us, our interest was to know knowledge, attitudes, and practices of consumers. And at that level, we did not want to know whether it's an urban consumer or a consumer at the rural setting. So that wasn't looked at, but the general information is that whatever came out represent what Kenyan consumers are looking at, especially the urban consumers. Saul's question is very interesting. From presentation of yesterday, most of the animal source proteins in Kenya appear to have come from northern arid parts of the country. I think that's debatable. Yeah, because it then behoves us to then ask ourselves exactly, because when you say beef does not necessarily, from my knowledge, come from northern Kenya. Beef that we eat in Nairobi, some of it come from Tanzania. So it's not, it would be unwise to conclude that everything comes from there. But then the second part of it says that the consumption of how come there is no research that has been done there regarding consumption of animal proteins from Dr. Yamo's presentation. Again, it's context. When we started off, we said our interest in the presentation was urban centers. And that's why we went for the 4 cities and 2 of the biggest urban centers. We are very clear as an organization where we are looking at. Even when we do certain things and presentations, we contextualize it into certain spaces. I know one of the campaigns we did recently had a lot of controversies because people assumed that we were talking about across the whole country, but we were very sure. Our drive has always been urban centers because that's where you're having high consumption of certain products, especially meat and meat products. And research here and information coming from even the nutritionist is telling you there's a certain shift in diets, especially in urban centers. And that's why we then look at consumer and knowledge and attitude patterns around that. We were not looking at production, we were looking at consumption patterns, especially in urban centers, which tend to mirror what is happening globally, and that is why we then have certain slogans and campaigns that we're working around. I think those are my two questions, and those would be my comments. Back to you, Patrick.
Thank you, Victor. Dr. Sunday, are you online? If you are, please you can proceed and respond to Dr. Mbaka's question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, please proceed. I can.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. It's a very simple thing, just like I said earlier, because I understand quite all right that we really don't have the technology to actually run this presently. And that is why we are coming in, like Alternative Protein Africa. But the truth remains that we have to first promote or create awareness, to publicize, to get people to know about alternative protein, to get people.
Sorry, Sunday, we lost you. You are frozen, in fact, from our end. Sunday, we cannot hear you, so we request if you can type your response to that in the chat, so that Mbaka is able to see that, and the rest of us who are online are able to see that. We go to our second session before lunch, and the person starting that session is Professor Catherine Kunyanga. She's a professor in food science and nutrition and technology at the Faculty of Agriculture, University of Nairobi, and also a coordinator, Food Security Center at UN Center of Excellence in Food and Nutrition Security. Those who are so much into research to understand our protein consumption and our nutrition, she is one of the go-to persons because her interests are in nutrition, food processing, value addition, food safety, post-harvest losses, and many others. Professor will be taking us through sustainable alternative sources of proteins, benefits, challenges, and opportunities. Karibu, Professor. Okay. Sorry. Okay, it's here. Which one is it? This one, eh? This one. Okay. We're just trying to set this up. Those who are joining us online. Just a moment. Okay, good. Yeah, it's there. Karibu.
Good morning. I hope it's still morning. I see people are busy. That's why I'm posting fast to see whether I have audience. So mine will be very easy because most people yesterday and today have highlighted some of the things. So mine will just be to fill the gaps, as Dr. Yamo said. So I've decided on this topic, sustainable alternative sources of proteins. What are the benefits, challenges, and opportunities? So what I'll do in short, I'll try and give a brief introduction around this topic, what alternative sources of proteins mean, what they are, although the definition has been given, so I'll not dwell on the definition. So what are the demand drivers that are making us go or choose other alternative sources of proteins to meet? The benefits, then challenges and limitation working with alternative proteins. There's a reason why we are not being served lab cultured meat here in Kenya. What are those challenges? Why are we not adopting some of these alternative proteins? Why are people not familiar with other sources of protein? The opportunities available. I think when you have new things coming up, new technologies, new innovations, you need to explore the opportunities. And then I'll give a quick, we have many studies or projects at the university. As you've heard, I had the research component and postgraduate studies at the University of Nairobi Faculty of Agriculture. So we have so much we've done. Actually, when I was preparing this in the morning, I didn't know how much I can squeeze in, but I'll try and give examples of Ed. But I've chosen a case study of green grams, which is a common plant protein in Kenya. I'll focus on Makueni and Tharaka Nithi County and some of the things we are doing and what is actually happening on the ground. And then I'll give a conclusion. So this was already mentioned. Why are we here today? Is because the population is really growing rapidly. So as much as Kenyans, we love meat, actually I have to confess, I'm one of the people who love meat. Yeah? I would rather have 3 pieces in my vegetables rather than skip meat. So I know most of us are meat lovers, but also we need to look at the other side. We've tried to develop commercial products around plant-based protein. And why there are impacts that we've seen as a result of consumption of some of the foods through agricultural and livestock growth. This is increased deforestation as we move to increased intensification in agriculture, greenhouse emissions, and water consumption. And this was highlighted yesterday, so I'll not dwell a lot on that. And therefore, what we are saying, there is need for more sustainable food production, including new alternative food sources. And this is the reason, because, and I'm glad I saw this statement in the report for the last summit. This is because really we need to move to sustainable or contribute to sustainable current food systems, increased biodiversity, and provide high quality nutrients for the world. And especially with regard to protein. Protein is very key. And therefore, that means we need alternative proteins that have low environmental impact from plant, insect, and marine sources. Now, I chose plants because insect is still coming up. You can see we have a number of projects with termites, black soldier fly, among other insects, including grasshoppers, and also marine sources. We are now moving also to marine sources, but in Kenya it's not really picked up. So I've picked plant protein because right now it's a new thing. Now, the consequences of climate change have threatened our food quality, quantity, and equitable dispense, exposing most of the vulnerable people. And I'm glad to hear someone mentioning the assaults, where we have high malnutrition rate. And actually, Kenya is still struggling with undernutrition rates. And this now means we have a population environment imbalance that we need to address. So we are having a lot of declining food availability. If you remember the last 2 years, we've been having drought. This year, thank God, we had rain, so we are hoping food availability will be high. So that threatened people's food security. So a good strategy really is to move to sustainable foods by exploring some of the functional food ingredients that we used to eat a while back, and they are now coming up because they have been shown through a number of studies that we've done. They are functional ingredients that are very important in human nutrition and health. So we are not talking only about nutrition, but food that can also contribute to your health or well-being. And this is because they have some things we call biofunctional and techno-functional properties that we've studied. You'll hear foods with anti-diabetic activity, for example. For example, I've studied pigeon peas. Pigeon peas is common in eastern region of Kenya, a bit of northeastern and western, but people don't consume it. But it has a lot of functional properties, like anti-diabetic properties, that people do not know. So those are some of the things I'm saying. Data is available. Why are we not consuming pigeon peas? Mnajua pigeon peas? Yeah, so that we are on the same page. What is the Kiswahili name of pigeon peas? Shida ya kuwa lecturer, I ask questions. Mbaazi. Mnajua mbaazi? How many have eaten mbaazi in the last couple of weeks? Awesome. Okay, we move on. Now, the other issue is with regard to this organization that invited us here on animal welfare concerns, which contribute again to environmental impacts. And therefore, that means the demand for proteins would increase and water and land resources would increase. So the environmental sustainability of some of the protein sources are also affected. And a lot of alternative proteins have been shown to have more sustainable origins, lower costs, and even better benefits that people are not aware. And I am glad Professor Dr. Yamo's presentation highlighted gaps that people actually do not know what are alternative proteins, what benefits they have, and some of the advantages they have of our meat counterparts. So we need basically to reevaluate how we look at protein sources. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is the demand drivers. What is bringing back these foods? And I have to say, traditionally, it's good to have that indigenous knowledge. People used to eat a lot of these foods. We never had cases of cancer or other health effects that are coming up, right? Who knows black beans or Dolichos lab? Jahe, black bean. How many have eaten black bean the last couple of weeks again? Hiyo ni uongo. All right. Anyway, my kids don't like it. Yeah, when I cook it, very few people eat it. But it has a lot of functional benefits that can actually help your nutrition and health. But actually people don't want to eat beans, right? Like black beans. So I don't know whether what has been raised as lack of education is right, but after we go through our case study, I'll show you. So what are driving us? One is the customer. So we have consumer attitudes. As much as we have guidelines, international and local guidelines that emphasize the importance of plant-based diets, people are not following them because of attitude, culture, and socio-economic factors, yeah? And that's why I've asked you that question. And then there is this health perception drive that consumers now want meat substitutes. Research links red meat to heart disease, which is a global health problem. Again, that has been a big driver. There's a lot of publication around this, if you can Google. Then avoidance of meat has also increased as we move more to other meat substitutes. And also manufacturers are also highlighting healthy protein alternatives. If you look at the market right now, you'll get a lot of products that do not contain meat but have high protein content. So that consumer attitude is very important. We are dealing with an elite consumer who is educated and therefore understands what is good for their health. So they will not take meat only. If you go to most homes in Nairobi, they have even a timetable in their kitchen. Today we are eating green grams, tomorrow we are eating chicken, the following day. So there is diversity. So it's not meat every day. So that elite consumer drives the market. So that means then we need to provide the market with these alternatives to meat. So we've also had a driver on limiting meat consumption due to environmental impacts that I mentioned in my previous slide. So what are alternative proteins? I think this was already mentioned. They are plant-based proteins or plant-based foods, as people call them, that are really replacements of animal-based protein products. So they are just a biomimicry of animal foods in terms of texture and flavor. Actually, if you eat, you'll feel like, I don't know how many have eaten soya-based products. They look like meat, yes? The taste, the texture, and everything. So that's what research is trying to do, to make sure these alternatives actually taste like meat. I was talking to someone yesterday. If you fry meat over lunch or as they cook for us during this workshop, you'll feel the smell coming, the aroma, right? But when you do that to beans, it's not the same. So when she said about peas, I understand. It tastes good. Foods that are actually attributed to bad health effects taste very good, including fat. The more you put fat in your food, it tastes better. And that's why you see people are not really for plant-based products. So I'll move on. The other benefits why we are moving to alternative proteins is because they require no antibiotics. And right now we are struggling with AMR issues, antimicrobial resistance. And this scientists are using as a basis to really convince people to move towards consumption of plant-based meats. And also, therefore, to maintain healthy animals, you know, the vets here, you have to give them a lot of antibiotics, drugs, and medicine so that they are healthy. And that now brings it in the issues of AMR. And animals also can easily get diseases. I've given a few there, bird flu, foot and mouth disorders, and all these really bring issues in terms of health effects when we consume meat. The energy conversion, you can see there also, you require more when you have livestock production as opposed to growing plants. And I like quoting as I go to why we need plant-based proteins. I don't know those who read the Bible, but when Daniel and his friends were harassed by King Nebuchadnezzar, they were not being given good food. And when they survived the fire, the king now allowed them to eat from the king's table, which you can imagine, king's table, what kind of food do you expect there? Meat, no, right? So they were allowed, they could eat those meat, whatever, wines and whatever. But they said, no, we prefer to eat legumes and pulses. And they said, no, the king has said, we need you young men to look healthy. And he said, you put us to the test for 10 days. Let's not eat from the king's table. And you can read the Bible for more information. Just feed us on legumes and pulses for 10 days and see who looks healthier, us or the men who serve the king. And actually after 10 days, they looked healthier. What does that tell you? It doesn't mean if you don't eat meat, if you eat yonjahe. Because in Kenya, the perception is a poor man's crop. No. So if you go to Runda, Muthaiga, what will you get? Meat every day, right? Go to rural areas, I was telling someone. What do they eat? Githeri, mokimo, which they put pulses. Do they look sick? Yeah? Do they have obesity? Yeah, but stop any restaurant here in Nairobi, you'll see. Yeah? The father, the mother, and the kids, they are all because of our dietary habits. Okay, so we move on. So why do we need this? Because there will be in the next, by 2050, we'll have the global demand for meat, as you saw yesterday in the previous presenters, is expected to rise. So we need sustainable food systems that can meet this demand. And that's why we're exploring plant-based proteins. And plant-based proteins like meat require less land than our current system. And as you can see, animal agriculture takes 77% of all the agricultural land on earth, despite only supplying 33% of humanity's food supply. That's a worrying statistic. And then plant-based meat, you can see in terms of emission of greenhouse, 30 to 90%. And this again was even, people went further yesterday to show comparison with the emissions from motor vehicles. So globally, the animal agriculture actually is contributing towards a lot of climate impact. Now, what are the benefits of alternative proteins? Before you convince someone not to eat meat and to move to plant proteins, you need to have a reason. They'll ask you questions, like the one that was being asked about millet. Now, I look at it from the scientific point of view, the nutritional quality. Our studies have shown that our plant proteins actually have high protein quality, and this we measure using the protein digestibility corrected amino acid score, which is a test that usually determines protein quality. So if you take your black beans, your legumes like Physiola vulgaris, your pigeon peas and other pulses, you'll actually realize they have quite a high protein content. And soybean actually has topped the chart among all the legumes and pulses. So I'll be highlighting examples of that we have. Other benefits, they actually have low environmental impacts in terms of land use, water use, and energy efficiencies, which I've already explained. So they contribute less to environmental impact as opposed to meat. Challenges. I start with the most obvious one, the sensory, organoleptic, the taste. When you ask someone, you give someone here chicken wings, and then you give pigeon peas. Which one will you pick? Yeah? Chicken wings. Why? Most of the time it's because of the taste. When interviewed, consumers say that meat will taste better than beans or pulses. That is a reality, and that's something research is working to address. What we have been trying to do is to do in-store demos, and I will show you in the case study what we've done in Makueni and Tharaka Nithi. Product placement, how we advertise such products in the market. Cooking shows. People don't know how to cook beans. You know, when I was growing up, my mom would just leave the githeri, the beans and maize. Inachemka unambo weke chumvi, you eat, right? But nowadays, with good cooking skills, you can actually make that bean taste even better than meat. Do you know that? I tell people, they come to my house, there's no meat, I serve them beans, but the way it is cooked, it tastes very delicious, right? So it's about even how you cook some of these plant proteins. So this education and sensitization on this is very important. Training on how to use cooking shows, recipe cards, so that they can see it's just simple and familiar. And another thing, actually, this I'm coming back to the ladies. You are here seated in a workshop up to 5. And you're supposed to go and boil your beans, which takes how many hours? Yeah? How many hours do you boil your beans? An hour. An hour? No. Beans. Dry beans. Pressure cooker. Kumbe umegundua pressure cooker. But remember, still you have to soak for how many hours? Because of anti-nutrients? Overnight, right? Or at least 6 to 8 hours. So with our busy careers, women are now working. So we are developing foods beans that are easy to cook, varieties that have good cookability, quality, products that are instant. From actually green grams, things like pigeon peas, you just need to put in your microwave 5 minutes, it's ready. Because you have to accept the reality. Convenience foods is a reality. Because the urbanization has come in, women are educated, they have to go to work. So you have to fill those gaps. And one of it, as I mentioned here, is that sensory. Lack of convenience, I've already explained that. So cultural heritage, we need to go back to our culture. When women gave birth, what were they given? Ninyama? Apana, what did they used to eat realistically? Millet, what else? Black beans. Njahe kwanza was very featuring heavily, right? And when men were circumcised, what were they given as they recover? This is our heritage. You don't know these things. Oh, my culture. Because culture, you have to address cultural issues. We need to go back to what we used to eat. And now they are coming up. Do you know buying a kilogram of black beans or pigeon pea is more expensive than even buying meat? Do you know that? Have you tried to buy black beans? But before it was the cheapest thing you could buy. Because now the consumer is coming back to these foods because they are more healthier. Yet, before it was a poor man's crop. The other thing is cost. I have to admit, when we talk of alternative proteins, by the time you develop that ready-to-eat product from beans, it takes techniques, technologies, and that means when you value add that product to meet the consumer taste or appearance or whatever they want, or less time in cooking, then that means you're using a technology. If you develop a based meat, that means then you need a technology. And when you value addition, the price goes up. So the cost has also made most of the consumers not move to alternative proteins. Then safety. Issues to do with the anti-nutrients that bind key essential anti-nutrients. And that's why I was asking, do you soak your beans, for example? But now with the technology, how we process current foods, then we're able to address that. Now, what are the opportunities? We've developed platforms to provide information about novel protein sources, and I'll be sharing a few examples. We need to help consumers understand issues about these products like regulations, food safety consideration, nutrition consideration, and marketplace status, which I've just explained are some of the barriers that we have in terms of adoption of alternative proteins. Then we need to provide objective science-based information. You have to admit the people who come to tell you eat these actually do not have the evidence. And that's why now academia comes in to actually tell you, when we tell you pigeon peas as anti-diabetic activity, they actually have the data to actually tell you this is true or to validate that information. So we also need to be careful because the internet also has a lot of information that sometimes might not be true. Now, I go to my case study as I summarize. I've chosen plant protein. As we mentioned, we have so many other sources for alternative proteins, but for this case study, I've used plant protein. Are you seeing the picture on my right? You can see the diversity, yeah? The options available. You need to ask yourself in your household, in your house, have you eaten all these things here? These plant proteins, do you consume them? And this is a photo in the market in Kenya, a cereal and legume market. If I went to your pantry or your kitchen, do you have these? Or is it just meat and milk in your fridge? So high protein crops as raw material for plant-based proteins is a big area, so this will be my focus. And we are looking at crops high in protein like dry peas, yellow peas, kidney peas, mung beans, black beans, which I've been mentioning, pigeon pea, etc. There are many, depending on which culture or which part of the country you come from, or even the region globally. If you go to West Africa, you'll get a whole range of other things they are eating. But these basically are in Kenya. And for a long time, soybean has been dominating. So if you go to most of the meat substitutes, you just see soybean, right? But now there are other plant proteins that we need to look at that have also been experimented too. And in this case now, we'll be talking about green grams. Down here, you can see some values. She presented how much protein you require in a day. Do you think this can meet that requirement? Look at the % protein content of those beans. Do they meet? Yeah? People are asleep. I told you I'm a lecturer. I need to make sure I've understood. Look at soybean is the highest, 37, but dry beans 20%, bagel gram 21%, kidney 19. It's a lot. And meat is usually around 20. It's a good option, right? Yeah, so why are we not eating? I go to meat alternatives as an example. Some people call them meat substitute, meat analogs. If you see this, they mean the same. So as I mentioned a while back, a lot of the meat alternatives have focused on soy. So you can see examples of meat alternatives in the market. But in Kenya, they have not really peaked. I'm sure you've heard of tofu, tempeh, seitan, and textured vegetable proteins from soybean. The other one is based on falafel. This is made from chickpeas and broad beans. Actually, I've visited like the UAE where they do the hummus from chickpea. Who has tasted hummus from chickpeas? It's delicious. But Kenyans have chickpeas, but they don't use it. Yeah. Look at the other one. Nuts at least we eat. Wanaume muko kwa nyumba. But now it's only the men eating groundnuts. Women, I don't know. I think they leave that for the men. Mushrooms, Kenyans are now picking mushrooms, right? I'm seeing a lot of small, older farmers now doing mushrooms, and they're in the market. Jackfruit. Iyo matunda nani ameona jackfruit? Who has seen a jackfruit? Moja. 2 only. 3. 4. The others, you need to catch up. So those are also examples of meat alternatives. Lentils, grain, nuts, and seeds. So these also are available, and they provide quite high protein. Pulses, we have lentils, chickpeas, peas, and most beans that are available. Soy, quinoa, nuts, and seeds. You can see examples there. Now, the example I'm giving for green grams, we did it under the Kenya Climate Smart Agriculture Project, which is a World Bank project under the ministry, but was being done under Carroll and the universities. So in our university, we focused on green grams in Makueni and Tharaka Nithi County. And we developed a number of products from green grams. Dengu, It's good to say the local name, right? Ndengu, you know ndengu? Jana si ilikuwa wangapi walikula ndengu? Yesterday. Hi. Ndengu, did you see ndengu in the diet yesterday? And only 3 people ate. The others ate meat. 4. Okay. So the local name is dengu. Actually, if you just boil it, it's very tasteless, right? And therefore, why we are doing innovative products is, first of all, to develop a product that has taste, has good organoleptic property. The other one, it has never been commercialized in terms of having a new product in the market, because I don't expect a youth like this to just go and buy green grams on its own. But if you develop like a ready-to-eat snack bar, so you'll buy. That's what my daughters I see. They will never go to the cereal section. But when you go to the snack bar, they will rush to that section. So what we are doing, first of all, for the ladies or mama, we have ready meals. The ngu already cooked, so you just go and warm. Composite flours, like you can make your nice chapatis. Have you had chapatis and mandazis with green grams? They are wonderful. They look beautiful. Extruded products, like breakfast cereals. Instead of eating just your kawa breakfast cereal, this one has green grams. So you're eating protein, not just carbs. So very nutritious in terms of high protein content, and then snack bars. And you can see some of the products our students have developed. Now, the approach we used is a participatory and cross-sectional. You don't just develop a product from your own thinking. So first we did, and we used also a value chain approach, meaning don't tell people to eat this and maybe it's not available, the raw material is not available. You need to build capacity all the way from production to market. So we did first on-farm trials where we made sure they have the correct seed, because there are new varieties that grow very easily, that are pest and drought resistant, and others that have been developed with even higher micronutrient content and higher protein content. And that's why it's important to tell farmers which is the best variety for this region, what will not be attacked by pest and diseases, because we're also concerned about high yields. And then also we had field days where we helped them select varieties that are suitable for their region, suitable for making these products. And also we developed user-friendly technology transfer material for this, and we did training. So now to produce the green grams themselves that are drought resistant, pest and disease resistant, that are high in protein and micronutrients, and also how to make the products. Because you can harvest. You remember there was one governor who promoted green grams. Farmers planted, but there was no market. What do you do? Right? So you need to tell them what will they do with those green grams once they grow. So it's good to also take them throughout the chain. So we did training and education of smallholders in these 2 counties by training them on selection of high-performing varieties, selection for high protein and sensory quality, especially taste. As I mentioned, green grams are not that tasty. Then engagement of farmers in quality assessment. They are the ones actually who did this. And then demonstration on cooking and nutrition quality, and also sensory analysis. As you can see there, the women are actually cooking. And then the other one, we were testing different varieties to see which one tastes better. And that's the one then they end up planting. And to those women happy, they're eating products from green grams, not the actual green gram boiled, but actual products made from green gram. So we've been helping them to test this organoleptic protein for plant-based foods. And taste and appearance are very key for a consumer. When you go to buy something, the first thing you look at, is it looking nice? And that's why now people in marketing and sales will put very colorful products where people can see. So if that product, first of all, doesn't look nice, people will not buy it. And then the taste. As I say, when you go to the food there, you first look at it before you pick, and then you taste. Does it look better? Then, of course, the nutrition is very important, and in this case, protein. So we've also trained them on regenerative agriculture, use of biopesticide and biofertilizers, and organic farming, because this is coming up a lot in Kenya. So these trainings really have helped them build capacity all the way from production to the market. You can actually produce, add value, and take that product in the market. Because if you cannot eat it in your own house, do you expect another consumer to eat it? No. So even as we talk of alternative proteins, we need to see what are the challenges on the ground, what opportunities and benefits do these alternative proteins have over meat, and that we can use to actually, in our platforms, even as we campaign on increased production of alternative proteins. What information is out there? And this is a very clear example of how we can do it. In conclusion, I want to mention that population actually is expected to grow to 9.6 billion by 2050, and the majority of all growth is in the least developed countries. That's a reality. There will continue to be a demand for protein that will strain the environment. As the population grows, the demand for protein goes higher. And now, based on my presentation, plant-based alternatives are necessary solution. It's a must. We really have to move to other alternative solutions to provide enough, the word is enough, protein to feed the world. Otherwise, we'll have malnutrition. We'll never get rid of malnutrition, food insecurity. And the industry, I don't know why the industry was not invited. Dr. Yamo, maybe next time you can target the industry, has an opportunity and the obligation to meet this challenge. It's not only about the farmers or the who have to grow these alternative proteins, but also the industry has to pick some of these to develop products that are consumer friendly. And that marks the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. And apologies to our camera lady. There was a memo, don't walk around, but as you know, professors, they have to walk around to see if their students are attentive and they're getting what they are trying to pass across. So thank you so much, Prof, for that presentation. I'm very sure you got a new term there. Frequently, we talk about one testing. When you go, I'm going for one testing over the weekend also. But for plants, it's organoleptic. Yeah? A new term. Media people, are we together? Our next presenter is Innocent Nambasa. She is a co-manager at Thrive Africa. And she'll be taking us through promoting alternative proteins through vegan school lunch in Uganda. So I'd like to welcome her to come in front and take us through the next presentation. Machine is slow. Which one? This one. Off my battery fast. Okay. Yeah, karibu sana. That's how we see it here in Kiswahili.
Mzuri, is that what they say? Should I say mzuri? If they say karibu sana, I know you're welcome, right? Karibu is you're welcome. So what do I say? Thank you. Asante. I'm not that bad. You know, Uganda has been planning to officialize Swahili for the last 30 years. And hi, everyone. I bring you greetings from the Pearl of Africa. My names are Nambasa Innocent. I am the Thrive Africa co-manager, and I'm with my colleague here. I'm going to introduce her. Chef Kola, just wave, yeah. So the two of us are in the same position with Thrive Africa, which is a project of Thrive Philanthropy. And yeah, we work together. She's a famous chef. If you want anything to do, famous vegan chef. So Yes, she's here. I don't know if she can volunteer or she can be paid. So, to begin with, I've put these flyers on your desks so that besides talking, you can get to know more about our work, the work that we do at Thrive. And we do several things. We do accelerators. We have like Africa Vegan School Lunch Accelerator. We have a women mentorship program that is currently being coordinated by my colleague, Nicola. And then we also have grants. So check us out and feel free. If you have any questions, I am here to support and respond. But we'll be honored if you can be part of Thrive Africa. So basically, this is what we do at Thrive Africa. These are some of our projects. Like I said, we're doing an accelerator. And tomorrow at 3 p.m., we're going to be having a webinar. So if you can register for that webinar through our website, I'll be honored to see you all. And then the Africa Women's Initiative that I talked about. And we also have an Africa Vegan Restaurant Week. We did the first one this year in January, and I was the coordinator. And we had over 20 organizations from different parts of Africa as part of this. So if we can have all of you participating from Kenya and from the different parts of Africa, for those who are online, it will be good. We shall have another Africa Vegan Restaurant Week in November as we celebrate World Vegan Day, which happens on the 1st of November. And then so much more. You can find out more on our website. So, everyone has been talking about alternative proteins. So we're looking at, are school lunches effective at reducing meat consumption? And here we're talking about alternative proteins. So I'll basically focus more on the Africa Vegan School Lunch program and the accelerator that we are conducting and why we are doing it. One, when you're doing a school campaign, there is a larger reach. For example, we are in Westlands, right? But then if there's a school in Westlands, you have students from different parts of Nairobi or even different parts of Kenya. So it means if you're sensitizing about, you're in one school, but then you could benefit over 500 students but who are from different corners. And those children will take back the message back home. So when you're doing a school, using a school approach, you have a larger reach and also limited resources, honestly, because you're in one place and you have different people gathered in one place. Unlike when you are, let's say in a hotel, you have to rent out a hotel, transportation, facilitation, but the school's already in a setting. They're already organized, so there are limited resources. For smaller organizations, this is something that you can consider. It helps to shape the dietary habits of children. Children are always learning about diets. They're learning about balanced diet. I believe most of us learned about, better diet practices from school, until now that we are thinking about our health and well-being and everything. But school was the first place we learned this. So children will learn better dietary practices while at school. And you, as an activist, you as an advocate, you can provide this by telling them about alternative proteins. And of course, choosing more eco-friendly food options. The whole of yesterday, we talked about the impact of animal agriculture on the environment and the greenhouse gas emissions from animal agriculture. So children are concerned about this, and they're concerned about making friendly eco-food options. The cost and logistics of providing these meals. I am glad the cost has really come out already. Plant options or plant proteins are more affordable. They are readily available, especially here in Africa where we are farmers. For example, in Uganda, where I come from, 80% of us are farmers. Even the poor are farmers. Because you find the poor who cannot afford healthcare, who cannot afford education, but at least they have a farm where they pick their food from. So there's the issue of cost. If we can see how, if most of these schools can grow their food, or if they could buy from farmer groups, it also works. And health benefits. This has been talked about. I really don't have to say much about it. So Thrive Africa Vegan School Lunch Accelerator, which is ongoing, and tomorrow we're going to have the third webinar. I encourage you to be part of it. And we are going till October, and in October we shall launch a joint campaign on 6th October, Vegan School Lunch campaign. So if you can be part of this, it is amazing. And one thing to tell you is, if you're part of this accelerator and you attend more, probably 70% or 80%, you stand a chance to apply for a grant, and you can get a grant to implement your project. So this accelerator, we equip African leaders with tools that are needed to become more effective vegan advocates. Vegan for animals, vegan for public health, and vegan for the environment. Also, we give advice on launching high-impact vegan advocacy and meat reduction campaigns in school. So if you're worried, you're like, yeah, I wish I could be part of this project. During the accelerator, we are giving you skills, we are giving you knowledge on how you can actually launch this kind of project in the school near you. And of course, we're going to be having over 20 cities across Africa participating. They're already participating, and to be glad to have more, because the more we are, the more impact we create on the African continent. So, why should we veganize school lunches? I am glad that from the past speakers, from professors and experts and doctors, most of these have been talked about. One, of course, let's talk about animal compassion. That beautiful picture with the beautiful sheep. Is that a sheep, right? You know, sheep look different in different countries, right? This is a sheep raised for its wool. Am I correct? Yeah. So compassion. We need to teach children about ethical concerns revolving the treatment of animals. When we want wool, most of these animals, they are alive and they cut off the wool because we want to wear wool. So we need to teach children about ethical treatment of animals, because just like us, animals feel pain. So these children need to know that. You've seen animals cry in slaughterhouses, right? They cry for pain. They're in pain. They cry for their lives, rather. If you've slaughtered a hen, I think that's close at home, and you're strangling it, it's struggling to breathe. You have seen that it really wants the life, right? So these are some of the things we need to teach our children. How can we treat these animals better? You've seen cows in sheds. We talked about industrialized animal agriculture. And because there's increased meat consumption, beef for export, now initially cows used to live, in free space on a farm. But now cows are being put in sheds. The milking is being done by machines. Cows want to move around. They want to, to go under the shed. They want to bond with their loved ones. But that does not happen in the sheds. What happens is their loved ones are fed with artificial milk, yet the cow produces milk, and now that milk is being consumed by us, and you know the disadvantages of milk as well. So it's one of the reasons that we are promoting alternative proteins. Why veganize school lunches still? For the health that has really been talked about, the NCDs and all that. And every parent, every teacher, every school is interested in the health of children. For those that have younger children, you know how much you struggle when it's school time with several illnesses. So when you tell parents about their children spending the whole time at school with no sickness, they will give you an ear. So if you're thinking of implementing a vegan school lunch campaign, think about talking about interesting the leadership and parents about the health benefits of a plant-based diet, including the reduced risk to chronic diseases such as heart disease, diabetes, we talked of obesity, and certain types of cancers in children. So basically introducing plant-based options on school lunches provides children with healthier options and helps them develop healthy eating habits. When they develop these healthy eating habits at an early age, this practice will go on. And most of us that are in our 50s or have parents or relatives in 50s and above, you know how much they are struggling with diabetes, hypertension, cancers, and so many other diseases. and also arthritis due to increased consumption of milk and all that. So if we can help these children in time start the healthy eating habits, we are saving the future generation. So that is what makes this vegan school lunch campaign very effective. And also for the environmental impact, honestly, this has been talked about. And the greenhouse gas emissions that we've talked about, livestock contributes 14.5% of global greenhouse gases. Land use and deforestation, the trees. Initially cows and goats used to live harmoniously with trees, But now the trees, especially when it comes to sheds, industrialized animal agriculture, the trees which are carbon sinks are being cut down and then they're growing pasture. So if you talk about land use, deforestation, because animal agriculture requires lots of land for grazing and feed production, leading to deforestation. And we all know the disadvantages of deforestation, Yes, then also water and pollution. Where I come from in Uganda, I come from the western part of Uganda, and animals are like a source of prestige. But then there is competition for water. People and animals are competing for water. In some of the areas where it's a bit semi-arid, they dig ponds. Now, the same ponds where people are drawing water from, it's where the animals are drinking from. And really, that's not good. That's not healthy. So there's that whole competition for water, and also the land is being used for the production of feeds and all that. And there's soil degradation. Animal agriculture can lead to soil degradation through overgrazing, soil erosion, and use of fertilizers and pesticides. Then there's antibiotic resistance. This is one of my biggest fears, by the way. Using antibiotics in animal agriculture can contribute to development of antibiotic-resistant bacteria, which poses a threat to human health. And every time I talk about this, I love to talk about the hens that are in cages, because these hens are not living their normal lives. They're in cages and the only thing they're feeding on is mash. So meaning they'll be given antibiotics to survive. Increased consumption of that chicken in future could make you antibiotic resistant. So be careful as you consume those hens, because due to increased demands, now the West is importing those cages here. First of all, the cages are filthy. One small cage, which is as big as this laptop, has 3 hens in. They're uncomfortable. Naturally, hens have to sunbathe, they have to nest, they have to, to flap their wings, and so much more. You've seen the habits of hens. So because they're not practicing their natural behaviors, they've been caged. Now you have to, feed them on antibiotics for them to survive, which is not good for our health. And then accessibility and inclusivity. We've heard of things like lactose intolerant. Many children out there are lactose intolerant. For us, growing up, like I said, I come from the western part of Uganda, and cattle keeping is like part of our major economic activity. It's the dowry. It's for prestige reasons. So if you are lactose intolerant, your parents had to find medicine to make sure you drink milk, like it was an abomination. How? You're from Western Uganda and you don't drink milk? But then this is inclusivity. If there's soy milk, there is a nut milk, there is coconut milk. For the children that are lactose intolerant, it's promoting accessibility and inclusivity. For example, Kenya, I believe Kenya, you're really not struggling with coconut because, man, it's everywhere. And the coconut we have in Uganda, it's from here, from Mombasa, I guess, right? From the coast. So it's also an advantage, and also it's a welcoming environment, If it's milk and we're all drinking milk, let's say soy milk, that is rich in proteins, that's good for us. And no one is lactose intolerant. It promotes that. And promoting inclusivity is good for children in school. So let's talk about food system sustainability. Let's talk about sustainable and resilient food systems. Well, one of our goals, I believe most of us here, is promoting food system sustainability and to provide schools, if you're doing a vegan school lunch program, with an opportunity to improve the quality of children's diet while reducing inequalities in the diet of children and their health through plant-based alternatives. So food system sustainability in schools basically refers to the practice of creating sustainable and resilient food systems within the school environment. So this means that whatever approach you plan to use should be centered around affordability and accessibility. i.e., if I want to implement my vegan school lunch campaign in school A, I need to find out what kind of lunch are they having, What does it take to have that lunch? Is it sustainable? Do they need support in growing their own food? What are the advantages and the disadvantages of growing their own food? Now think about supporting schools to develop policies, programs, and practices that support food production, procurement, and importantly, consumption of healthy and sustainable plant-based foods within the school environment. Most of the schools that are in rural communities have land. I've at least seen this in Uganda. Land used for playgrounds, and there are trees and all that. Imagine if they could plant some fruit trees, if it could plant some legumes, and some grains and everything. And also, if there's no land, can you link them to farmer groups so that there is increased accessibility to that food? Additionally, can you see how you, as civil society or as government, support them with food storage facilities, support them to grow their own food so that there is sustainability and also there is food that has less negative impact on the environment. And then talking about alternatives, that's a picture of nut milk. This is from Uganda. So I talked about local sourcing through school gardens. One, you can encourage schools to grow their own food. And if they do not have land, they can use, recycled material. For example, like recycled plastic bags, recycled, plastic bottles, tins and everything, where they can grow leafy vegetables, they can grow some legumes and all that. Most of us understand what backyard gardening is, I believe. A source from local farmers I talked about also promotes environmental sustainability when it comes to transportation of these foods, And also, the advantage of having school gardens, it is a good learning form for children. Most of us that have young children, at least I've seen this in Uganda, our children are told, get a bottle, plant beans, plant peas, and bring them to school. And then the children watch how those plants are growing. They don't tell them to bring eggs or hens, So how about this is done at school already, like there's a garden. So when it's time for that science lesson, the children just go to that garden and they plant beans, they plant peas, they plant leafy vegetables. They are learning both for their health, and then also, it is good for them to know where this food comes from. Let's look at strategies for promoting food system sustainability in schools. Of course, we talked about the health for children. Every school, like I said, is interested in health options for their children. But the challenge is many don't know how to, or they don't even know what's healthy and what isn't. Yeah, the people that think, okay, most doctors say, eat chicken, eat fish. But how healthy is that chicken? I already talked about, antibiotic resistant. How healthy is that chicken? So as doctors encourage you to eat chicken, how healthy is that chicken? The fish. East Africa, we know how much Lake Victoria has been contaminated. There's a research that was done on Lake Victoria, and it shows that some of the fish in Lake Victoria contains microplastics in mercury. So how safe is that fish if you consume it and it goes into your body? The fish from the pond also is fed on antibiotics, So we need to think about all these proteins. In one way or another, you find that animal products also, they have their disadvantages. Whereas the doctors are telling you to stay away from red meat, but also the white meat, how healthy is it in this world of antibiotics? We can also look at sources of proteins. Honestly, this has been talked about. I really don't need to go there. The sources of proteins, alternative proteins have been talked about. And the nutritionist explained. Personally, I didn't know much about this food, that foods, there are those that have half proteins and then full proteins. And then if you probably combine legumes and, and wheat, right? and whole wheat, and you're able to get full proteins. But I like the fact that soya or soy is self-contained, like you find everything in it. So there is need for education and engagement of students, staff, and parents. If you want your vegan school lunch campaign to be successful, you must engage relevant stakeholders. And these are the students themselves, the teachers, and the parents. You need to engage them about the importance of food system sustainability, which we talked about already, promotion of sustainable food choices, and the need to include sustainability education into school curriculum. We talked about working with the school, to have these policies and also working on their curriculum. So as they're teaching their children in that curriculum, there is foods that are sustainable. There is alternative proteins. So focus on involving them in all this. Encourage schools to incorporate sustainability education in their curriculum because they need to raise awareness about the importance of plant-based foods. We have all seen the importance of plant-based foods. We have seen how animal proteins, they are good, but they are a danger if overconsumed. But then the plant proteins are good for our health. So doesn't that need to be in the school curriculum? Children need to know. The teachers need to know. The parents need to know. Whereas the parents are talking about the children need special meals. They cannot eat, ugali and beans for the whole term. But then tell them about the advantages of these alternative proteins so that they know if you want your child healthy, then it's better that way than advocating, for ugali and beef. Then strategies still for promoting food system sustainability, environmental conservation. I talked about it. But still, there is need to encourage schools to use sustainable farming practices. There's need to reduce pesticide and inorganic fertilizer use. And there's need to promote regenerative agriculture. And these are some of the things that can be done in school. All in all is to reduce the environment impact of food production. Tip schools on how to reduce this. And then the other day I was telling my friend that Uganda has the most beautiful cows. Do you people have these cows in Kenya? Do you? Ankole Longhorn country. Very beautiful. Now you know why we are attached to cows. We love them so much. So there's need to use the human education concept. Human education concept basically is an interdisciplinary field of study that emphasizes the importance of compassion, empathy, and respect for all beings. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. No, it's on here.
Okay. Done. Okay.
It's okay. I don't know why it had disappeared on the beautiful cows. Whoever comes to Uganda, at least I can get you one of these as a pet. They're good as pets. Yes, they're good as pets. Very friendly, you call them by their names. And the names depend on color and behavior and the size of the horns and the style of the horns. So we're talking about using the human education concept, especially when you're in schools, so that children children understand why it is important to respect all living beings, including the environment. It's an approach of teaching and learning that aims to foster ethical awareness and critical thinking skills in order to promote positive change. So, human education basically seeks to empower individuals to make conscious choices that have positive impact on the world around them. What is the world around us? It is people, it is animals, it is the environment. So if you're taking this to school, you need to, to understand human education as much as possible. And also, here are some examples of human education topics that you can think about when you think about implementing a vegan school lunch campaign in your school. We talked about environmental impact on animal agriculture. That's ethical as well. Animal behavior and communication. It's good to understand animal behavior. For those that have pets, you understand your dog, you understand your cat, you understand your rabbit, you understand your cow or your sheep. The ethics surrounding animal testing and experimentation. The children need to understand the ethics surrounding this. If you're to experiment on an animal, what must you consider? They need to understand the pain that these animals go through. The children need to understand the impact of climate change on animal habits. They need to understand the role of social justice in environmental sustainability. Basically, human education is an important tool for creating a more just and sustainable world through promoting empathy, compassion, and critical thinking. It can also help foster a more ethical and responsible society, especially among children. Who wouldn't want, to groom children that are more empathetic, that are ethical, that are sympathetic, and are very compassionate? It also, human education helps us to make informed and compassionate choices about how we eat and how we live. So we already talked about the role of human education to veganism. Now, human education can also help, to know if someone is compassionate or empathetic towards a certain animal. They'll think about it before they eat the beef, before they slaughter hens. Girls, where I come from, it's the girls that slaughter hens. So you think about it, how will this hen feel? And then we talked about critical thinking, and then the environmental benefits, like I said earlier, with increased knowledge about the impact of climate change, which is more or less a subject in most schools, it is easy to introduce a topic that discusses the environmental benefits of plant-based diet, such as reduced greenhouse gas emissions. So basically, the Vegan School Lunch campaign is an opportunity to promote the concept of empathy and critical thinking in schools. I urge all of us, to think about this and take it on. So who are we targeting with this kind of campaign? School-going children, teaching and non-teaching staff, the school caterers, and the government. If the government policies can incorporate alternative proteins, can incorporate the advantages of alternative proteins. Most of our governments have seen Kenya is up to reducing NCDs. Same thing as Uganda, Then let's talk about alternative proteins that are good for reducing, contracting these NCDs. And then, like I said at the beginning, you can be part of this campaign. You can be part of Thrive Africa, and it would be an honor if all of you can be part of us, so that together we can reduce cruelty towards farmed animals. Together, we can promote alternative proteins in schools. And together, on the 6th of October, we can jointly launch the Vegan School Lunch campaign. Thank you so much. My names are Nabasa Innocent from Uganda, and I work with Thrive Africa.
Thank you so much for that presentation. You missed about talking about this. Okay, thank you once again for that good presentation. She's asking me to talk about this. I believe most of us received it. It's a vegan advocacy grant. Thrive Africa is part of a Thrive philanthropy, They have grants. You can visit their website and see more in there. I just want to confirm, we have our last presentation of today, which should be done by Amy Wilson. We are trying to check if she's ready to do that presentation. If not, we can.
Hello.
Excellent. Hi, Amy, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, and you?
We are fine, thank you. Good to see you online.
Great. Yes, great to be with you online. You can see and hear me fine, is that correct?
Yes, we can, thank you. Are you ready to do your presentation?
Yes. Give
Okay.
me 1 second. I'm just going to share my screen with you all. Great. I just want to check you can see my slides.
Yes, you're able to see them. Yeah, thank you. So, Amy Wilson, she's from Animal Law Reform South Africa, and she'll be taking us through sowing the seeds of change towards a more just and inclusive food system in South Africa. So, karibu sana, Amy.
Great, thank you so much. So, hi everyone, I'm Amy. I'm very upset I can't be with you in person, but I'm very happy to be part of this wonderful event. And I want to say a special thank you to Dr. Yamo and Judy for all of their work. And I'm going to catch up on some of the sessions I've missed online. So today I'm going to be talking about sowing the seeds of change towards a more just and inclusive food system in South Africa. And time permitting, I'm going to go through these 5 subjects. And just to let you know, I'm going to be going through some of them quite quickly, but if there's time afterwards for questions, or if any of you would like to reach out to me afterwards, I really welcome your input and your thoughts. It's an ongoing kind of work that we are thinking about here in this context. So just to give an intro, it's a very complex topic. I'm only going to be scratching the surface, but I encourage you, I'm going to be talking about 2 specific documents today, a working paper that we produced as part of a project and a white paper. And I encourage you to look at those. They're on our website. Also, that the focus of the research that we've done and even our recommendations focus on industrialized animal agriculture. So we're not looking at small scale farming. We're not looking at extensive systems, particularly when we're talking about some of the harms. We're really focusing on industrialized animal agriculture in the South African context. And we recognize that not all animal agriculture is conducted in the same way, and it's dependent on, the farmer, the facility, the region, and various other aspects. And also, because the focus I'm talking about today is shifting away from intensive agriculture and towards alternatives, and by alternatives, we're largely talking about alternatives to protein in the form of plant-based alternatives and cellular-based alternatives, otherwise known as cultivated meats, cell-based meats, lab-grown meats. And of course, not alternatives are the same either. And they all have different consequences, and a lot more research needs to be done. So this is just one small part in the research that needs to be done, hopefully going forward, as we look to more sustainable food systems. So just quickly, for those who are not aware, Animal Law Reform was formally established in 2017. It's South Africa's first and only dedicated animal law nonprofit organization. So that means we use governance, namely law and policy, to implement our change, not really grassroots activism, although we definitely support that, and some of it is related to that. We look at systemic change at a legal level, which means we largely are targeting government and private entities, particularly corporations, in this case operating within the food system. And our vision is a society whose laws, courts, enforcement agencies, and private entities advance the protection and flourishing of humans, non-human animals, and the environment, and that they are held accountable. And that's a very important aspect, is we don't just focus on animals. We look at social justice more broadly, because we recognize that human and animal suffering are intertwined, and of course that we rely on an environment to exist. So our 3 pillars are animal flourishing, social justice, and law. And our mechanisms that we use are education and research. That's one of the ones I'm going to be focusing on today with our research project. legislative and policy reform, and litigation and legal services. So as I mentioned, we use laws specifically to achieve incremental change for vulnerable beings and account for their interests in the legal system. So against that, let's look at some background and context in South Africa. As I mentioned, I'm very grateful to be part of this. And I'm going to be talking about a project that we undertook last year predominantly with funding from Humane America Animal Foundation. I'm going to focus more on the white paper, but of course there was quite a lot of work in the working paper as well. And I'm going to give a shout out to my co-project leads and researchers, Makanatsa Makonise and Farai Muchadei, who worked on this with me and spent a substantial amount of time and energy in putting this together. To frame this within the Africa, I think that is an important framing, although it's one of them. If you look at the slide from the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, you can recognize that, it seems like there might be some issue with my screen sharing. Give me 1 second to sort that out. Sorry about that. Okay. Hopefully now the screen sharing is working better. Apologies for that. So you just missed some pretty animals and the South African flag. Great. So the slide that I'm on now is a representation from the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations. And as you can see, it talks about food insecurity. Africa is by far the highest from the other continents mentioned in the world: Asia, Latin America, and North America. So this is very important when we're talking about how we are supplying food to people, right? Just to give some more context, we have a population of over 61 million people as of the other day, and we are among the highest rates of income inequality and absolute poverty. So we can't talk about food systems and new ways forward unless we consider the realities on the ground for people who are living in absolute poverty and this huge, huge inequality that still exists in the country even after apartheid. So looking at the state of food security and nutrition in the world, we see the prevalence of moderate to severe food insecurity was close to 45%. That's nearly half of the population, or 26.3 million people. 11.3 million people are food insecure. And I also wanted to pull out some statistics about how this implicates children in particular, when we look at the context of the Constitution and the prevalence of stunting in children, close to a quarter of the population. It's estimated that 20% of South African households have inadequate or severe inadequate to food. Okay, so against this context, I'm not going to spend too much more on it, but it should also be contrasted with the fact that these people who are living in severe food insecurity, moderate food insecurity, we have many people who are also obese. In fact, South Africa has the highest rate of obesity, nearly 42% of people. So it's clearly something is failing within our food system, just looking at those two areas in particular. And again, looking at the fact that people cannot really afford, are living below the poverty line. So when we're talking about food security, new products, it's very important that these are accessible to people, considering the level of poverty. And as I mentioned, the inequality bleeds throughout the entirety of society and is very prevalent in the food system in terms of accessing food, but also in terms of who owns the land, who are the farmers, and even looking in the context of corporation and the vertical integration. So again, it's a lot to think about, but thinking about the food system very much holistically as we're trying to move towards a more inclusive food system, and what might that look like, particularly today as I'm talking about alternatives. And then we can't forget that against the human context, we have all of these animals who are implicated, sentient animals, over 1 billion of which are killed in South Africa every single year. And those are land animals. We're not even talking about invertebrates such as aquatic species and insects. We have some of the highest rates of meat consumption in South Africa. We even have some of the highest meat consumption rates in the world. Looking at poultry, our consumption, we're ranked 8th in the world. And the projections are that this is going to increase. So it's not something that's decreasing over time. It's in fact something that's actually getting more significant, which makes it more important that we have the provision of alternatives and that these are done properly. Great. So this is the general trend. We have more people. We need more food to give them. There's more reliance on animal source foods. You'll hear me talk about ASFs, animal source foods, and this intensification has led to farming methods that are wholly and largely unsustainable from a welfare perspective, from a human health perspective, from an environmental perspective, and various other ways. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about the Constitution, and the reason this is an important framing for the discussion as we look ahead to different systems is that the Constitution of South Africa is the supreme law. It was our new birth certificate of our new democracy after the abhorrent system of apartheid was finalized. And the supreme law means that all law and conduct needs to be consistent with it. It's one of the most progressive in the entire world. It's meant to transform society. It's enforced and upheld by the Constitutional Court, and it advances social justice, dignity, and equality and freedom. So those are values that are held very dear and very important in the food system. The state is required, and so are corporations, to protect, promote, respect, and fulfill the rights. So how does that have to do with food? Well, luckily, we have a right to food in Section 27 of the Constitution, as well as the right to water. This is sufficient food and water. So against that context, the state has to take reasonable legislative and other measures to achieve the progressive realization of that right. Now, what that means is there's actually a specific duty on the government to make laws and to make policies that give people food, in essence. And that becomes very important when we look at the current way that food is being provided and the current systems that are being promoted by the government, and whether they are doing a good job at fulfilling those rights. And then also children have a specific right to basic nutrition in the following section. And again, this becomes important as we look at the food system. So agriculture in SA is also largely driven by a variety of crops, right? We have fruits, grapes, etc., but we also have a huge livestock industry, and that ranges across the board from products such as eggs, milk, and dairy, all the way up to different types of meat products. As I mentioned, we kill over 1 billion sentient land animals. That includes chickens, pigs, cows, and sheep, but it also includes horses, rabbits, lambs, and various other animals, just to give you the context. So we have a huge number of animals who are being slaughtered every single year. So as I mentioned, I'm going to be focusing on alternatives. Just to be clear what alternatives mean in this context, the focus is on protein and meats for the project, on plant-based meats, on cell-based meats, cellular-based meats, and even fungi-based meats, those which are made from mushrooms, etc., and even alternative methods of farming such as precision fermentation and 3D printing. What alternatives do not mean in this context is shifting towards fishing, wild-caught fishing, collecting and harvesting of aquatic species, the farming of aquatic species through aquaculture, insects, harvesting and farming, etc. So those are not considered to be alternatives in this context because they still very much promote animal use and in fact promote more animals to be killed when we look at the number which are actually needed to make up the same amount of protein of the larger animals. To give a sense of some of the alternatives in the South African context, this is from ProVeg Africa. There's a huge spectrum and it's increasing all the time, the amount of products that are available, everything from fish to biltong. South Africans love their biltong, they're world famous for it, but you can get mushroom biltong, mince replacements, beef, chicken, slices, etc. So that's just a sense of some of the products, which again are increasing all the time. Denny's is a fungi-based or mushroom-based company, so we see a lot of mushroom-based patties and products and sausages, etc. So there's a huge spectrum of products that are available. And in the context of cell-based meats, South Africa is particularly important and strategic on the African continent because they have 3 cell-based companies that are registered and formed there. So the laws of South Africa and how these are treated in South Africa very much implicate the rest of the African continent and alternatives. We have Mzansi Meat Co., Systematic, which is focusing on seafood, and then Mokhale Meat Co., which is also focusing on game meat. So that's just in a context, some of the alternatives that exist. But let's look at the right to food. As I mentioned, everyone has the right to food, but within that right is also the right to water. And if we look at the amount of water that is required currently to produce animal source foods, including meat, they are by far exceeding what is required in terms of what would be needed for alternatives, at least based on the best information that we have available. So if we're looking at fulfilling our right to food, we also need to consider our right to water in the same context. Similarly, it takes 135 liters of water to produce a single egg in terms of the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization. We don't have South Africa specific information, but we know that it takes a tremendous amount of resources, one of which is water. So that constitutional framing becomes even more important as we're looking forward. Another very important right in our constitution is the right to environment that is not harmful to your health or well-being, and it needs to be protected for future generations and present generations. So I'm going to contrast that with what we know to be many of the harmful implications of industrialized animal agriculture. I won't go through all of them. This is from one of the projects we worked on together with 4Paws, that highlights the contribution of animal source foods to biodiversity loss, extinction, pollution, whether it's soil, water, air, deforestation, etc., etc. You get the point. There's a huge impact not only on the animals themselves, but on our environment, and of course the communities that live close to these operations who are worst impacted. In contrast to that and the rights that I've just described, looking at the role of the South African government in what they perceive to be promoting food security and certain policies, we see a massive push by the government to promote animal sourced food. So not only the traditional animal sourced foods like chicken, beef, lamb, etc., for example, through the Master Poultry Plan, where we want to increase the production of poultry, including eggs, and become really dominant on the African continent. But the government is also promoting animal source foods such as game, which is wild animals that they want to be farmed, and they have a huge game meat strategy that they put out last year, a draft of which was for public comment, where they really want to make South Africa a leader in game meat, and they see huge opportunities in the national and international market, which of course implicates many animal lives. They also have red meat development plans, but they're also focusing on developing the aquaculture industry. And there's been a bill that has been put forward 3 separate times and hasn't been passed. So now these industries are largely unregulated and operating in this territory where there really aren't proper standards or laws to protect not only the animal interests, but the huge implications that these industries have on the environment, on our resources, etc., human and animal health. Then in contrast with these promotions of these animal source foods, we have them taking negative and harmful steps towards alternatives. For example, you may have seen this burger ban. It was in the headlines internationally, where the government says you can't call plant-based foods or other alternatives, burgers, sausages, etc., because those are related to animal source products. So you can't have a veggie burger. It's called the burger ban colloquially. Right. So that is just a very broad framing of the impetus for this project. And then, of course, as an organization focused on animal sentience and the intrinsic value of animals, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that we have a really significant constitutional court ruling that interprets the right to environment to include animal welfare and animal interests. So we have a really good precedent that shows us that the court system in South Africa, the highest court, places intrinsic value on animals as individuals. And if we consider those billions of animals that are implicated, but we place value on them as individuals, there's really very much a disconnect between the realities on the ground, the legal system, the rights that we have, and the actions of government. Okay, there's also various other rights that are implicated. I won't have time to go into these today, but you can see them mentioned in the working paper specifically, but it highlights the fact that, for example, workers are very much abused in these industries, and it has many other harmful areas. So this is the impetus for the project. It means that our pervasive food insecurity and our constitution require our government to rethink the current systems, right? We need to do something differently. We need to do better, and we need to be strategic, and we must be decisive to build resilient food systems. I'm not talking today, unfortunately, about food justice and food sovereignty, which are very much important concepts in this context. But it's important that when we're building a new system, we look at those aspects as well, and that we consider things holistically. And I'll be talking a little bit about how we might move forward doing that today. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the project that I mentioned. Really, the purpose was to conduct a diagnostic analysis of the barriers to transform the system. So what is holding us up? Why are we not getting there and moving towards alternatives, if that's even a good solution? Let's interrogate that a little bit more. But let's also look at the regulatory gaps. As I mentioned, we focus on law. So we really wanted to survey where the law was at and where the gaps were at, and also how the law could potentially be used as a tool to promote these alternatives, if that is even a good solution. And as I mentioned, there was a working paper and a white paper. I'll briefly mention the working paper. It's over 233 pages, so there's a lot of information in there. We were hoping that it would be an excellent resource, not only for South Africans and those working in that area, but other African countries, to see if there's similarities of that can be utilized. And we released it on Nelson Mandela Day, which is coming up soon. And the main topic was the barriers to the transformation of the food system. And we linked it to Nelson Mandela Day because the theme was an intersection between food security and climate change. And we really thought that was a vital time to highlight these links and illustrate that South Africa does have a broken food system, particularly because of its reliance on intensive animal agriculture. And this consisted of a gap analysis, like I mentioned, where we surveyed the laws, and we didn't only look at animal protection laws, we looked at environmental laws, competition laws, food health and safety laws, various other aspects of the food system that are regulated, how where we sent out a survey of key stakeholders that operate within the food system, including retailers, lawyers, NGOs, academics, and try about different aspects of the food system. How much meat do they eat, or how much protein do they eat? Would they transition to alternatives? Are they aware of the way animals are treated? Are they aware of the environmental implications of eating meat, etc., etc.? We asked them a huge amount of questions just to try and gauge the understanding and also the perception as to whether they would even consider transitioning away. So those are just some of the topics. I won't go through all of them today, but really public perceptions are extremely important, and what was hindering some of this transition there. We got some interesting results, and again, I won't go through all of these, but just focusing on environment, it was clear that about a quarter of them only definitively recognized that consuming animal source foods had a negative impact on the environment. Some of them weren't sure, some of them thought it had no effect, and only about a quarter recognized that there was a negative implication for eating animal source foods. We also asked them about the way that animals were treated, and 70% of them believed that we had adequate laws in South Africa regulating how animals should be treated. For those of us that operate in that space, we recognize that the laws are severely inadequate, but 70% of people seem to think that we're doing fairly well. 56% thought they lived happy lives. 58% approximately thought that they were humanely treated. And the final ones I want to highlight is that 79.6% of them believe that farmed animals such as chickens, cows, pigs, goats, sheep can suffer. So there was a recognition there. But overall, 83% of them thought that eating meat was healthy or good for them. So it was clear, we again, there's a lot of different information there, but it was clear that predominantly the vast majority thought that animal source foods were good, healthy, and that animals were treated well, and that the environmental implications were not that severe. We also asked about health, for example. So now I want to talk a little bit about the white paper, which we released on World Food Day, called Sowing the Seeds of Change Towards a More Just and Inclusive Food System in South Africa. And the theme, which we thought was quite significant, was leave no one behind. So as I've already indicated, we leave many people behind, we leave children behind, we leave women behind, and other vulnerable populations of humans, but we also leave animals behind. And the white paper calls on the South African government to recognize that people and humans and animals are left behind, but that it needs to change, and that we need to develop a robust regulatory ecosystem that moves us away from intensive industrialized animal agriculture and towards these alternatives. And this is because it implicates not only animals, but our guaranteed human rights in the Constitution, which they have duties to work towards. Okay, and the government needs to recognize also that alternatives hold a huge amount of opportunity for the country strategically to invest in these, and what this might mean to make us a leader, not only on the African continent, but even globally, right? And it's possible for us to leapfrog over some of these really harmful technologies, as we've done in other industries, and see how we can move the country forward towards food security. And as I mentioned, the two avenues was the first very significant one was moving us away from industrial animal agriculture. How do we do this? And then shifting us towards a different future. And that spoke to the recommendations that we have. So the methodology and the process that we followed was the research component, as I mentioned, which informed the working paper and the white paper. We came up with identified issues based on all of this information. We then looked at the barriers to transforming the food system, pillars to what a new system might be built upon, the strategic priorities as to how we might get there, and then specific recommended interventions. So again, I won't go through all of these, but these are the identified key issues that we had. So these are all different kinds of interests that are implicated in the current food system: animal interests and protection, human rights and social justice, environment, food health and safety, and accountability and transparency, economic considerations. And that's all in the context of governance and regulatory shortfalls and failures. One example of one of those is consumer protection, where we see people are being misled, actively misled by animal use industries through practices of humane washing and greenwashing, and people shouldn't be misled. And this is particularly pertinent in a country like South Africa, where we have huge numbers of illiteracy and people who, historically haven't had access to education. So we looked at that as a very important thing we need to look at going forward. Then in terms of the barriers, these are a combination from our key informant interviews and the public survey of barriers why we can't transition away from animal source foods and why we can't get towards alternatives. And they range everywhere from taste to texture and the sensory measures to, for example, the power that the industry has, the lack of information that people have, the lack of awareness, accessibility to information, economic factors, and then cultural and religious and social interactions. And I just want to highlight that here because our research showed us that many people view meat as a symbol of their heritage and wealth, right? It's very much entrenched into their habits. South Africa is known for the braai, the land of the braai. We celebrate Heritage Day by slaughtering many animals and throwing them on a braai. There's also significant stigma attached to veganism, and people think it's expensive, and they also think that it's for white people. So that's a barrier to transitioning people towards that. At least that was the results of what we got from our research. People think it's more expensive. They think that because beef is more expensive, it's better and it's a sign of prosperity, and also that meat consumption is integral to a good and healthy diet. So this led us to the development of our pillars, the 7 pillars on which we said a food system must be built. It must protect human rights and advance social justice. It must protect the environment. It must protect animal interests. It must promote nutrition, human and animal health and food safety. There must be accountability and transparency. It must be financially and internationally responsible, and it must be properly and fairly governed and regulated. And I won't go through all of these, but fair governance means many different things. For example, recognizing the intrinsic value of non-human animals, avoiding conflicts of interest. For example, having the Department of Agriculture promoting simultaneously animal source foods, but having a mandate for animal welfare. So that's just in a nutshell some of the propositions that we made, coming up with our strategic priorities. There were 5 of them: regulation, governance, law and policy, research and development, investment funding and financial aspects, transparency and accountability, and education and awareness. I'm cognizant of the time, so I won't spend too much time going into this. And I did just want to highlight these were our recommended interventions that we came up with, 15 of them, and then sub-interventions underneath each of those. And again, I won't go through all of these, but they range everything from placing a moratorium on new large-scale industrialized animal agricultural facilities. So that might be in the form of not issuing the relevant permits for expansion of facilities and the issuing of new facilities. It also means looking at dedicating specific resources to the development of alternatives. So, for example, developing a strategy and a vision, as we've seen other countries do. There's also specific measures about doing better in terms of our animal laws, right? Getting more research, investing in research and development, as other countries have done. Looking at the subsidies that are currently being provided. And perhaps also thinking of issuing subsidies in a different way. And then government policies, procurement, looking at auditing the existing facilities, education and awareness, and then looking at labeling of products. As I mentioned already, it's a big issue with the burger ban. So then we highlighted specific countries and how much they had invested in the development of alternatives, including everyone from India, Denmark, Netherlands, to the EU, Singapore, China, UK, and other countries. So what does that mean for us looking ahead? I've just gone through a lot of information. I know I've gone through some of it quite quickly. I also want to call out the fact that I am talking about alternatives in a way that promotes them, but there are many criticisms against alternatives, right, which I haven't delved into, and that could be a whole topic on its own, particularly around health and the ultra-processed meat alternatives. There's potential negative environmental and health implications. We need to be aware and concerned about techno fixes and how historically these have appeared in the South African and African context, and rather focus on systemic change and empowering people. And very much important is recognizing that these alternatives are highly linked to intellectual property rights, which means that they have the potential to really exclude huge proportions of the population if we don't do it properly. However, if we build in mechanisms that empower people, empower vulnerable groups, building them into business models, giving them percentage shareholders, etc., of those companies, making some of these things accessible, we can try and potentially mitigate against those risks so we don't perpetuate some of the same harms we've seen in the industrialized animal agricultural system, where it's held by a very small minority of people and the vast majority are left out of that. So really, in summary, I think the idea is that our regulatory framework in South Africa must take an integrated and holistic approach to address these issues. We must promote rights, we must promote animal interests, we must move away from this trend of industrialized livestock. We need to focus on social justice and actually the ethics of our food system, but we need more research, we need more funding, and we need to work together. So I'm welcoming thoughts, feedback, suggestions, how we can expand on this project, how we can implement this project, partner with other organizations and engage with other stakeholders. And just to end with one of my favorite quotes is that with the little seed of imagination, you can grow a field of hope. So hopefully these seeds today and this work that we're doing, and all of you are doing such amazing work, will help us grow into a more sustainable future. So that's my time. Thank you very much for your time and attention. And there's my email in case anyone wants to get hold of me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amy, for that good presentation. Quite a lot there. And just to let everyone know that slides will be shared. Those who are joining online, the email that you used to register for the webinar, you'll get all the presentations through that email. Those who are here and like to get presentations, make sure you pass that desk over there. You leave an email there so that you get presentations. Now it's time for Q&A. I understand it's we are still. Yeah, I understand. Yes, I understand you are slightly past time, but it's good to hear what you have for the presenters. We started the presentation by Professor Catherine on sustainable alternative sustainable alternative sources of proteins. Then Innocent presented about promoting alternative proteins. There's another mic. Anyone who has spotted it? There was another mic. Seems this is putting on and off. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I think now I have much control. Yes, so we have had those 3 presentations. And thank you, online participants, for keeping it up to this hour. And now it's time for Q&A. If you have any question or clarification, please, now it's your time. And I also acknowledge that there are some other questions which came for Victor. I think you have 1 or 2 questions, so I'll read that and you'll be able to respond to that. So starting with online. Yes, this was for Victor. I'll try just to read what we have got from our online participants. It's from Faith Wakibia. Thank you for the presentations. As a country, are we at the level of discussing alternative proteins? We still have one of the lowest per capita consumption of meat globally. Maybe we should be talking about improved animal welfare because most Kenyans will still eat more. Most Kenyans will still eat more meat regardless of what we tell them. There's a comment from Saul. He had asked a question earlier. Dr. Victor Yamo, thank you so much for the super fantastic presentations and for clarifying the objectives of your research. I'm very passionate about proteins, and that explains why I went on to become proteomics guru after my early years at Makerere University as a junior lecturer. Besides, I'm an East African from Mount Elgon region. I think just a comment to acknowledge the good work. I think this comment goes to Catherine. It's from Hashim Yusuf. Moringa leaves is also a good source of plant protein. Maybe in case you have a comment on that. Then there's another comment from Janet Omami, and this touches on our cooking habits. And Janet says, our traditional way of preparing these alternative proteins is also our undoing. It makes the meal boring. When cooking meat, We use many additives and different cooking methods, making it kind of favorite. Hence, we have to incorporate making the best of these alternative proteins. So again, it's a comment about our cooking habits, which needs to be improved. There's a Dr. Mary Ann. It's a comment, a well-spent couple of days. We have Ibrahima Kouma. My name is Ibrahima Kouma, the Ministry of Animal and Fisheries Resources of Cote d'Ivoire. Cote d'Ivoire has set up two projects, namely Project on Animal Welfare and that of Food Security. These two projects need technical partners. Is it possible to partner with World Animal Protection Africa? And how do we proceed? Ibrahim, if you can hear me, yes, World Animal Protection is happy to partner with you. And also, I understand there are other civil society organizations here who would be happy to partner with you, to support you as you implement and try to work on these two projects. So feel free to network and exchange contacts for the good cause of animals. There's anonymous attendee. It is critical to understand that a vegan diet can lead to nutrient deficiencies, especially in Kenya's ARSAL counties. So maybe this one, Professor might comment on that, being Professor of Food Nutrition. It's critical to understand that a vegan diet can lead to nutrient deficiencies, especially in Kenya's ARSAL counties. A big challenge is the availability and affordability of plant-based alternatives in these counties. Is it important to respect cultural practices and traditions which are based around livestock? Vegan messages to young children in these environments and cultural settings will confuse them as they grow up. Veganism may initially conflict with traditional diets centered around animal products. Children might face challenges when navigating social settings where non-vegan food is prevalent. Is it important to respect individual choices and preferences and disparage these African lifestyles? So there's a question basically touching if vegan diet can really meet all the nutrient needs. And as Sandy also Naomi touched on that, so you can also comment on that. So that is what we have so far from our online participants. So I'll ask three of you if you can comment on that, then we can come to those who are here in the room with us. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll start maybe with the first one. Moringa leaves, that is true. Actually, my list was not exhaustive. These are some of the indigenous foods that are coming up, and actually not only plant protein, but also micronutrient components and also functional properties, like I mentioned, anti-diabetic and antioxidant capacity. So that has been well documented, and actually people now are using moringa leaves in their diets because it's a healthy option also, and growing it and planting it because it's a small tree that grows within a short time. Cooking skills I mentioned, I said if you eat my beans, you'll never eat meat again. I find that when I go to West Africa, they really cook their food well, not only beans, but also vituka okra and meat. East Africa, in terms of our food, is very tasteless. I think we and I mentioned we are teaching farmers also cooking skills because it depends on how you cook, right? You can make those beans taste like meat or even better. Like if you do a nice bean curry and eat with the rice. And I think schools are doing this. You've seen diets changing to rice and beans, right? But they have to make it tasteful. I visited some school feeding program because we're interested in working in terms of food safety and nutrition. But the beans, they just boil, they put kidogo oil. It's so tasteless. But there's a way you can actually add other ingredients, onions, tomatoes, and spices just to make it taste better. So it's doable. Even dengu. I mean, most people who make chapati will always make dengu on the side, even if there's meat. But there's a way you cook dengus and they taste better. The other thing I mentioned is the variety. There are varieties that actually have been developed that have a better sensory quality. Diet deficiency, yeah, actually, the message was not that we should not consume meat. I think this is where people give the wrong message. The problem with meat is overconsumption. If you're eating more than your requirement, kwanza kama uko over 20, then unakula 1 kg in one sitting. I sat and I keep telling this story. I sit some places and I see men come, naitisha choma 1 kg, namaliza naitisha sasa fry, dry fry 1 kg. One sitting, one man. I've seen this happen. That's too much, and already the guy is big, is above that age, Nini. For protein, children who are growing, they need protein more. They need for growth and maintenance, and vulnerable groups like when you are lactating. But like me, my age, I don't need to eat a lot of meat because we just need for maintenance. Once you're already grown, you just need protein for maintenance, repair of worn out tissues. So the more you eat and you don't expend, like now you'll eat meat and come back and sit here. Where will that excess energy go? Fat cells. So you end up getting obesity issues and other issues like hypertension. So with the diets that are plant-based, you also need to balance. For me, I say is about diversity and variety. So as much as we're eating plant proteins, we're also saying we are not saying you should not eat meat, because there are nutrients in meats that you'll not get in plants. For example, vitamin B12, which has been shown to be very high, things like iron, which is very high, especially the heme iron in meats. So really, the message is not that we should stop, but we should also appreciate that now with the global changes, we need to seek other alternative protein sources. And the earlier we start, the better. You know, Kenyan way, we wait until things are bad. That's when you start adopting. So the other day, GMO came, right? And we were told this is the solution for food security. So we wait the last minute when things are really bad. That's when we start looking for alternatives. I think with regard to plant proteins, let's do it now. This is the time, because this is something we've always done. The way we were brought up, we've always eaten these plant-based proteins. What we are saying is that they need to feature more prominently in our diets as opposed to meat-based diet. But we are not saying that you should not eat meat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor, for that. Ami, I know your presentation was quite witty on alternative proteins, plant-based and cellular alternatives. If you're online, maybe you can give a comment on that. And if that is able to meet nutrient deficiency. Of course, I understand professors covered that so well, but it would be good also to get your comment on that.
Yes, sorry, I'm struggling to hear a little bit, so I hope I've got the question right. I understand it's whether you can get everything you need nutritionally from a vegan diet?
Yes. Yes, that's the question.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, people have done many studies that show that people can live very long and healthy lives, and in fact, people live longer and healthier lives on a vegan diet. I'm definitely not a nutritionist. I'm a lawyer, so I absolutely cannot speak to that. But from the research that I've done, which has been extensive in terms of looking at some of the health implications, by and large, they've seen that it's been positive. And I'm not talking about eating processed foods. I'm talking about eating healthy grains, legumes, and higher levels of vegetables. So there's a ton of research that shows that vegan diets are healthier and more sustainable for you. Personally, I've lived 15 years that I've never felt better. So I think it's possible to do it. But obviously, there's other factors that come into play, that people's circumstances. So.
Yeah, thank you, Ami, for that. Dr. Yamo, if you are ready, are you able to comment on that? But just to add, there's another question that relates to Catherine and Tammy's response, and it's from anonymous attendee. Is a vegan diet sustainable given Kenyans' reliance on livestock as a source of protein and livelihoods? Can an absolute vegan diet meet Kenyans' demand for proteins, given the fact that we already strain to ensure food security, even with both plant and animal proteins? Furthermore, I think animal protein consumption and welfare are not mutually exclusive. We can achieve both. I think the two presenters have been able to answer that, but in case they feel they need to comment to that, the floor is still open. But Dr. Yamo, you can come in to comment. Yes, Faith Wakibia who asked. Thank you for the presentation. As a country, we are at the level of discussing alternative proteins. We still have one of the lowest per capita consumption of meat globally. Maybe we should be talking about improved animal welfare, because most Kenyans will still eat meat more regardless of what we tell them. To you.
I have to thank Faith, my good friend, for that question. And I think ideally the Prof has answered most of that question, because it's not about our per capita consumption anymore. It's about the impacts of eating excess meat. And Prof talked about it. Naomi, the nutritionist who started the day, talked about it. The impact, the health impacts that come out from that excess consumption. And that's why for us as an organization, it's not really about telling everybody to stop eating meat. And I think Prof has also said it's not about you not eating meat, it's about the consumption. And if I'm hearing Prof and Naomi right, as we grow older, the amount of meat that we require is even supposed to be less. And that's what is critical for us to then consider. And so Faith, it's not about, I'm just trying to go back to refer to what she's saying. It's not about our per capita consumption, because at certain levels, you know, per capita is an average. The average between the person who's getting 100% and the person who's getting 0% is 50%. And that's where the challenge is. There are aspects and people in our systems across Africa that are eating more meat than even in the developed world. And those are the people we are saying, maybe it's time to relook that process. Then Prof then went even further and talked about, if we don't do anything, we might not have enough capacity to grow that meat. We might not even have spaces. And remember, Faith, in this country, agricultural land is being converted to buildings. So sometimes I even wonder where this extra meat we want to eat is going to be grown. So there are other dynamics that we need to be looking at. Deforestation, the climate change issues, the health issues, all those things will need to be contextualized, so that even as we are eating more meat, and I hear you when you say we will continue eating more meat, and more relatively to what, we also contextualized and become part of the big discussion that's happening. I think Amy has just alluded to the fact that water is an issue. In this country, in this continent, water stress is an issue. Are we going to be able to grow that meat if we cannot even get enough water? And I hear the Constitution says that I have a right to good, clean water. So those are the issues we are dealing with. So I think let's not look at this issue as in isolation. It should be contextualized into the big debate and the current issues that we are dealing with, so that we are talking from a place where we are offering solutions. We are offering solutions to deforestation. We are offering solutions to water requirements. We are offering solutions to our health issues. We are offering solutions to our climate issues, so that it's all encompassing. And I think that's where sometimes as technical people, production people and vet surgeons, we lose it, because we look at things from a prism of, I need animals to get sick to make a living because I need to treat them, or I need people to consume more so that I can produce. Maybe what we need to do in terms of production is, how do we then ensure that the animal is efficient? I agree with you, we need to look at the animal welfare issues around some of these production systems and the husbandry issues, so that we still keep small number or the same number of animals that we are currently happening, but they're effectively and efficiently producing. Because I don't think as a country we've reached the place where our animals are producing. Look at the milk industry. A farmer around here is very proud if you're doing 30, 40 liters per day. But globally, there are animals in certain production systems producing 60 liters. I have been on a farm in this country where cows are producing 60 liters of milk. So maybe that's what we need to be looking at. How do we get animals to produce efficiently and effectively while catering for their welfare aspects, instead of looking at the consumption bit of it, where we then need to do other things. I hope that clarifies the position. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Victor Yamo. Now we come to those who are here with us physically here. It's your time now. In case you have question, comment, please help me to pass the mic. Oh yes, Naomi has a comment.
When we talk about alternative proteins, it's also important to be cognizant of the nutritional component of the food. Professor is right that there are nutrients such as iron, vitamin B6, B12 that might be a concern when you talk about a fully plant-based diet. However, there are policies and it is ingrained in the law that some foods be fortified. When you look at the packet of maize meal, it's written it's fortified with B vitamins. So it is possible to do fortification and supplementation to meet the nutritional needs of some of these nutrients. Something else that comes up about nutritional content is the level of carbohydrate in legumes that are our alternative protein. So we need to be aware that while legumes and pulses provide protein content, they have an amount of carbohydrate. At the same time, cereals are a source of protein, but the amount is lower than that of legumes. So when we are combining these foods, it's important so that we see we don't get overboard by eating too much legumes and having them contribute carbohydrate to our diet, therefore negating the problem of NCDs. Lastly, when there's someone who commented and said that people will eat what they want regardless of what we tell them. I want us to look at an example of fast foods. A few years ago, like in the 1990s, was it something that was traditionally done in Nairobi, in Mombasa? So what has changed that is the extensive marketing, the way those foods have been marketed to us. So we can learn from things like those. If we have changed our attitudes about those foods, then we can change our attitudes about plant-based proteins.
Thank you so much, Naomi. And if I remember, your presentation indicated we need 0.8 grams per kilogram per body weight. We all know our body weight. You can take your calculator, just multiply your body weight with 0.8 grams. Then that will tell you the amount of protein that you need in a day. And Naomi, out of curiosity, and so that you're on the same page, yes, can you tell us what you mean with fortified food? We only see that when you're buying maize, meal, and other foods. Maybe what is fortification for betterment of everyone?
Fortification is whereby a nutrient in its chemical component is added to a food, so that a food that lacked that nutrient or had that nutrient in limited amounts ends up providing that nutrient. And supplementation is taking like the way you take Panadol and the iron and folic acid supplementation. So it's the nutrient itself in the tablet alone. Yes.
Okay. So basically it's improving food to be more nutritious, to have many nutrients, in short. We always see when you are buying maize meal, you always see fortified maize meal. But you see anyway, hii ni unga tu. So it has been enriched in a way. Any other comment from those who are physically here? Yes, Doc.
I want
you can introduce yourself so that people know you, then you proceed.
I'm Arithi Mutembei. I work with FAO. I just wanted to comment on, I think she left on when she was talking about the school-based programs, especially training of school children. So I was wondering how, like in Kenya, we had the 4K clubs that I think recently were being promoted by the government. So I don't know whether they can see how the 4K clubs can help in training children on food and vegetable and animal welfare.
Okay. I think who has Mike is the best one to comment on that. But it's good innovative. It's a good innovation because, as you know, once we start telling the young ones what to eat, they'll grow knowing what is good for their health. And again, as you know, many lifestyle diseases start at that early age. For example, malnutrition, you know, is quite a big thing. Standard growth is quite a big thing. So the moment you are not giving your child balanced diet is a big challenge. But Victor, you can comment that from campaign perspective of creating awareness, because after Protein Summit, one of the key things is to create awareness about proteins.
Well, I want to agree with Doc here, Mutembei, that that's one of the things we look at, and that's why for creating awareness, we go back to schools. There's a whole process of going to schools. You remember, this country can't just walk into schools and do some of these things. But from an animal welfare perspective, that's part of the process. We have been engaged as an organization from the word go with the say KCDI, Curriculum Development Institute. And that's one of the reasons why in CBC there are aspects of animal welfare that are done at primary level, at primary school level, for those of you in CBC. Yeah? Because that's where you start bringing up a child in a certain particular way and they'll understand. So it's something that we are interested and willing to do, and that's why we work with academic institutions, the universities. I think we've gone slightly lower. We are starting to see how we can then engage with high schools, and hopefully, if Omondi was here, our behavioral and education officer, then he would have explained it better. But that's part of the process. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you, Yamo. Any other question, comment? Okay. There's a comment from Sylvia Acheng, and she says, this is a very good information, noted the other alternatives to meat. So again, it's people knowing other alternatives to meat. Sometimes we see beans, not some, beans, we eat beans. You see, but we don't see them as proteins, we see them as beans. So it's high time we need to consider and appreciate other alternatives that we have. Just to let you know, thank you to online participants. You have been engaged all through. Currently, we have 71 of them attending this today's conversations, and they are coming from different countries. 7 of them: Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, South Africa, and even Australia. So this is a conversation which is happening and growing. So Aman is to thank you for being here with us up to this hour. And I'd like to mention to the media guys, media interviews will be conducted here. So please do remain behind once we break for lunch, so that we do the interviews, then we can go for lunch for media guys. In the afternoon, coming back to continue with our small groups. I won't keep you long because most of the content was shared in the morning was quite informative. So we'll be having a brief meeting in our groups that we had yesterday. And to that, I would like to welcome Dr. Victor Yamo to give official thanks on behalf of World Animal Protection and way forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Mwinde. On behalf of World Animal Protection, we want to thank you for turning up, both the participants in the room and those who are out engaged online. Unfortunately for the online participants, this is the end of it. As we explained in the morning, if you want to be part and parcel of the communique, please send your comments to myself or Dr. Mwinde through our email addresses, or you can put them on the chat. We will pick them from there. Once the first draft is developed, we will circulate it to all participants because we want to include you. Last night when we were having the discussion, there was quite an interesting observation that last year we just said World Animal Protection together with CSOs and a few fellows caught feelings because they were not part of CSOs. So now we want to include everybody. So we want academia, we want the government, we want research institutes, we want social bakers, media, anybody. So do not look at the communique or the joint statement that will come out of here as a CSO's property. It is for all of us. Let's have your voice heard, because that's the piece of document that you want to engage governments with at the Climate Week, Africa Climate Week, and then at COP28. We need to have African voices being heard in all these matters around animal welfare, climate change, animal consumption, etc., etc. And with those few remarks, I want to say thank you very much. For the people here, enjoy your lunch, and let's meet at, okay, it's 6 minutes to 2. So do I say, let's meet at 2:30 so that I give you slightly some time.
Okay, yeah, and make sure you have mail card because you require it. And you have seen these guys moving around with cameras. And if you happen to be here in the morning, you saw some beautiful images of yourself, of your team, of members of your table. So that you're able to get that as well, there'll be a barcode on the 2 screens. Scan it, and once you scan it, you'll be able to access those photos. And Scan Me is there to get the photos. Thank you, and enjoy your lunch.
For the media fellows, Evans is organizing an interview. So please, if you want to be interviewed.